Chapter 215, Sustained Battle. Through battle he had lost again. Gong Sun Cha looked at the devastated landscape, his remaining shreds of troops, and grimaced. He didn't remember how many times he had lost. The skill of the mysterious war chess opponent was extremely high. He didn't know anything about the mysterious opponent. He couldn't even find any traces of this mysterious person usually. But he knew, this mysterious person that he had never met really existed. Because the other would play war chess with him. Even though the other would use Wuxia as a cover, the skill of the two individuals were so drastically different that Gong Sun Cha could easily detect it. Gong Sun Cha intelligently did not ask. It wasn't too hard for him to accept that the soul of an elder which had not extinguished was living inside Wuxia's body. Thinking about Wuxia's sudden rise in the last 2 years, it added some support for his speculation. However, the feeling of defeat was still terrible. He wasn't content. Even though he knew this was the normal and most rational outcome, and he was able to learn many things from each loss, but he just wasn't content. He disliked defeat, or it was more accurate to call it hate. This unwillingness flashed through his heart and was buried deep down. Anger was not useful. The war chess was different than real battles, but this was the only place right now where he could learn how to command. There was no room for him to pick and criticize. Also, that mysterious elder was clearly an expert at war chess. The wondrous tactics and the frightening offensive power. Each time the battle was at its fiercest, he would have a feeling that the person opposite him was a large man with a heavy and flaming hammer. What the other was most skilled in was dictating the battlefields, the offensive zones. It could not be rivaled. He would often see the other begin killing in all directions with an unreasonable and arrogant attitude. The balanced situation, once the two sides started to kill each other, would herald Gong Sun Cha's defeat. His territory was like a crisp cookie. First, it was his borders that would crack. The gaps would grow bigger and turn into a situation where his entire defensive line would break. Brutal, forceful, charging forward. Many times, Gong Sun Cha would be puzzled. In his mind, the commanding ability of the mysterious person was much higher than him, and he would be a better candidate to lead the troops. Wuxia did not use the powerful one but threw such an important and troublesome matter to a beginner like him. He pondered it for a while before throwing the question to the back of his mind. Having finally found something that made him feel interest, and having such challenging battles ahead of him, he felt excited just thinking about it. So amusing, so interesting. Having sorted out his emotions, Gong Sun Cha burrowed back into the camp. In the war chess games that Sui Mo had made, if the forces were not Yao, they were Mo Xiuzhe were the rarest. Other than the most classical Xiuzhe combinations, there was nothing that he could reference. In comparison, the combinations of Yaomua soldier types were much richer and extremely detailed. Sometimes, he would wonder. Was that elder inside Wuxia's body an old Yaomua? This guess was not unsupported. Other people might not be able to see the true face of the golden armor guards, but having been in command of them for so long, how could Gong Sun Cha not know? These 3 golden armor guards were the white-scaled attendants of the Yao guards. White-scaled attendants were a low-level soldier type frequently seen in the war chess. He had used them multiple times. The reason that he could use the golden armor guards to their maximum potential was due to the inspiration and help that the war chess gave him. However, what he did not understand was the power of the 3 golden armor guards far surpassed normal white-scaled attendants. Gong Sun Cha completely did not care whether the mysterious person was Yaomua or not. There were enough problems for him to have a headache about already. No matter if it was Xiuzhe or Yaomua, there had to be great consideration taken in the combinations of soldier types. Like the classical sword seal, sword Diana combinations of the Xiuzhe. The combinations of the Yaomua were more variable and rich. But Gong Sun Cha only had 28 Ningmai and 26 of them were sword Xiu. Of the last 2, one was a saber Xiu, while the other was a Diana. Completely all battle Xiu, but there were no shoujo that could take a support role. On paper, this kind of battle force was very strong. In reality, for group battle, the structure of this kind of force was extremely terrible. The effect of everyone was the same, that meant that the group lacked depth, diversity, and was therefore unable to complete formation transformations. Sword Shio had the strongest offensive power, but it did not mean they did not have weaknesses. Compared to other shoujo, Sword Shio lacked the endurance for long battles. Sword Shio were heavy on offense and light on defense. Their other flaw was their defense was too weak. Large-scale battles were different than individual battles. Sword Shio were the kings of individual combat. Their strong and sharp attacks and their fast speed allowed them to be at an advantage in short individual battles, to pressure the enemy to the point of suffocation. In individual battles, Sword Shio only needed to consider how to kill off the enemy before the enemy could threaten their weakness. But in group fighting, especially on large scales, Sword Shio usually needed the protection of other shoujo at their side so they could release their strong offensive power. If a troop only had Sword Shio, the enemy only needed to stop their first wave of attacks. Large-scale Sword Shio fatalities would only follow this as the Sword Shio began to tire. Okay, in reality, he didn't need so many transformations. Gongsun Cha could only tell himself this. In any case, after leaving Little Mountain Jia, everyone would split up. Sui Shixiang had told him this multiple times. The reason was very simple. They couldn't support such a large group. On this matter, Sui Mo did not lie. If one wasn't in charge, they did not know the price of food and supplies. Sui Mo felt the pressure already with 40 people. Especially in Little Mountain Jia where the only things that could replenish Ling power were Ling grains and Jingshi. Yet the intensity of training could not be lessened. They were racing for time against the Yao army. The later they left Little Mountain Jia, the higher the danger. Jingshi had side effects and could not be used in large amounts, so the expenditure was not as high as Ling grains. Sui Mo quickly could not support it any longer. It's not going to work if we keep going like this, Sui Mo said decisively. The Ling grains I have are only enough to support us for another half a month. Half a month, Gongsun Cha looked at Sui Mo. What should we do? Battle to feed battle. Sui Mo did not hesitate to say. We can only do this. Gongsun Cha felt helpless. These 40 people were still far from what he demanded. However, he had no solutions to the problem that Sui Mo stated. However, he instantly thought of the necklace he had mentioned before. Have the talismans been made? I've grasped the method, Sui Mo spread his hands, but there aren't enough materials. With that, Gongsun Cha completely cut off his thoughts about the same heart necklace, assembling the 40 people and departing instantly. Sui Mo actually wanted to go with them, but thinking about Chun Yucheng who was still at the beast pool, he decided to stay and protect the base. The 3 golden armor guards were also kept behind. Of course, he said, since it was a true battle, then it should be treated as real one. To guarantee safety, Sui Mo had set up formations around the mountain valley. Most of those were illusory formations. Right now, his skill with formations had grown. Little illusory formations and little killing formations were interlocked. The power wasn't high, but to distract the enemy, it was more than enough. Fire beads, seal soldiers, golden armor guards, adding on the illusory traps, his safety was quite secure. Gongsun Cha took his 40 subordinates and slowly progressed. In terms of prosperity, Little Mountain Jia could not compare to Sky Moon Jia. Naturally, there were not as many experts here as Sky Moon Jia. However, if it was in terms of harshness, Sky Moon Jia could not compare with the present Little Mountain Jia. 28 Ningmai, in Sky Moon Jia, it was not an insignificant force, but in the present Little Mountain Jia, it wasn't anything. The reason was very simple. Those shoujo of lesser strength had already died. Those that could survive until now were all ones with some skill and intelligence. Under such cruel conditions, the peak of Zhuji was the bottom line of survival. Ningmai first stratum was normal, Ningmai second stratum was enough to become the elite of a small troop, and Ningmai third stratum was enough to enter the rank of experts. As for Jin Dan, there was just one. These individuals similar to the Golden Armor Guards, their cultivation was between first and second stratum of Ningmai, but their true power was far beyond normal Ningmai second stratum. The Yao Guards forged from ancient dragon bone, golden crow fire, and the nether pool, could normal people compare? 3 sword shio formed a combat unit. 3 combat units, 1 at the forward position, 2 at their sides, formed a triangle. They were the frontline guards. Gongsun Cha picked the sword shio that could fly the fastest. The other 10 combat units maintained a distance between each other. Ma Fan was alone as he weaved through these units. 3 people to an unit was Gongsun Cha's response to his lack of means. The 3-talent formation was the simplest formation, but these people still had not familiarized themselves with it yet, and this was just the simplest formation. In large-scale battles, what was crucial was the tactics. But just 40 people. If this was on a large-scale battlefield, they wouldn't even form the smallest and most basic combat unit. To command such a small group, what was most important was formations and cooperation. Formations was something unique to Shouja. From the most basic 3-talent formation to the super-large formations that required tens of thousands of Shouja to set up, they could all increase battle strength. Take for example the 3-talent formation. In the formation, the 3 people's energies would be merged, and they could communicate, increasing the connection between them. It was a very practical and useful formation. Some higher-level formations would have killing moves unique to them. If they were activated, they were so strong the sky would change color. However, it was not so easy to make a formation. Everyone inside the formation needed to accurately remember their position and the variations. This group hadn't even grasped the most basic 3-talent formation, the difficulty of such formations could be imagined. Formations might be able to increase battle power, but they were not for all purposes. In battle, the situation could change in an instant. What it tested was the perception abilities of the commander, their quick response, and the cooperation between their comrades. Gongsun Cha stood at the very center of the troop. Several of the most powerful were beside him. Ma Fan wandered around nearby. Glancing at Ma Fan, Gongsun Cha was very satisfied. Out of everyone, Ma Fan was the one most important to him. Other than his strong battle power, he had comprehension that was stronger than other people, and he could always quickly understand Gongsun Cha's intentions. So Gongsun Cha did not hesitate to make him part of the corps, and custom-made a battle tactics centered on him. Just at this time, the front passed on news. There was a situation. A flash of faint red rose and left Gongsun Cha's soft and delicate face. His first battle had come. Chapter 216, Gongsun Cha's first battle. It had been so hard to think of the Yin fire bead, but the result was that he couldn't find Yin fiend grounds and form Yin beads. It had been so hard to understand how to forge the same heart necklace, but the result was that there weren't enough materials. Luckily, that same heart necklace wasn't damaged, and had been given back to Gongsun Cha. Zhuemo was depressed, but he still did what he had to do. He needed to cultivate his consciousness. There was no way around it. Jinji was a good thing, but it consumed consciousness and it was an eternal consumption. As to practicing sword scriptures, Zhuemo didn't have that much interest. His 5-essence sword set had been forged. Even though there was a distance until it was perfect, but he was very content with the present progress. The power of the 5-essence sword set was very high. At the time, his idea had been very original, but now, he discovered he had made a fatal mistake. The sword formation was formed, but there was no accompanying sword scripture that he could cultivate. Of the 5 sword essence, other than Li Water sword scripture, and Ice Dragon sword scripture, he only had the appearance but not the substance of the other sword essences. Basically, his 5-essence sword formation was a paper tiger. This made him very discontent. Anyone would not be happy. Spending so many good materials, putting in so much effort, but having made such useless things. However, he temporarily did not have a solution, so he could only put it away. He didn't practice the move of little thousand-leaf hands that Pu Yao gave him. All of his spiritual power was given to Jinji in this while. He didn't even need to think about body cultivation either. Any earth energy he gathered would be given in tribute to Pu Yao in the end. It had been a long time since he had done body cultivation. Even though he knew that drawing out the earth energy was good for him, but at this point in time, it really wasn't worth the cost. He put the most time on formations. To break through Little Mountain Jia, there were only two paths. One was increasing his own strength. If he could reach Jin Dan, the other Jin Dan would not block him. However, was it possible? Completely impossible. The other path was what he was doing now, increasing the strength on his hands. Everything to do with commanding the group, he threw to Gongsun Cha. He believed in this battle maniac. He would definitely express the desire for battle which was concealed under those feminine and delicate features. The remaining question was, what could he do? Suemo didn't want to wait around when it came to his own little life, and put all his hopes on Gongsun Shidi. Therefore, an extremely weighty and meaningful question was put in front of him: how could he increase the power of a group quickly? Talismans, he threw that away. He didn't even have enough materials to make the same heart necklace, much less anything else. He did have a lot of materials, but that was only if he considered only himself. If he included everyone, there really wasn't enough. Like the grandiose talismans of the Golden Armor Guards, there wouldn't be enough money even if Suemo sold himself. Ling Dan, Suemo quickly threw away this method. Suemo himself had never encountered Ling Dan that could increase cultivation. Slightly less effective were those support-type Ling Dan. He could make a batch, but against a Jin Dan, it wasn't enough. What was left? Formations. Suemo's topic of study was the Mo matrix. In the beginning, he hadn't thought of the Mo matrix at all. It was completely due to being forced by the lack of Ling grains that he had an extraordinarily daring idea. He could carve Mo matrices on all these shouja. The thin Ling energy in the air, after automatically gathering under the power of the Mo matrix, was very substantial. Even more importantly, they would be able to use the Ling power of the Jingshi and not have to worry about the impurities of the Jingshi harming their bodies. In comparison, the Ling power in the Jingshi was much richer than in the Ling grains. Of course, his rational mind suppressed this insane idea. Right now, they were at war with the Yaomo. If he took a group of people with Mo matrix carved on them out, there would be only one outcome: being killed for being Yaomo. He had never felt how valuable the Mo matrix was before. Now, he had a deep experience of the benefits of the Mo matrix. If he couldn't carve the Mo matrix, then he could go back a step. Didn't Pu Yao say that the essence of the Mo matrix was formations? As long as he could find the formations that could purify the impurities in the Ling power, and the formations that could automatically gather Ling, wouldn't the problem be solved? He had a ready example of the Mo matrix. Due to the Mo matrix being on his body, and his extremely sensitive consciousness, he could clearly feel every change inside the Mo matrix. The simple-looking Mo matrix was far more complex than he had imagined. Suemo's skill in formations was not low now, especially after having studied the micro-formations in Dan-making. The formations in the Mo matrix had some similarities to those. Other than formations, there were many pictures that seemed decorative, yet were extremely similar to formations. If he wanted to understand which were useful, and which were not, it would take 3 to 5 years. But in Suemo's hands, this became a very simple matter. He only had to use his consciousness to sweep across, and then he could clearly detect it. However, this was just the first step. Even though he had gotten rid of many of the distractions, but the remainder was still hard to work out. Not every formation would have a visible effect, but once they were removed, the entire MO matrix would lose its effect. Other than that, there were some semi-formation constructs. These semi-formation constructs would form a very special kind of formation with Zhuomo's flesh and blood. This was probably these constructs that merged the formations with flesh and blood. Luckily, this degree of difficulty wasn't enough to scare Zhuomo. The Yao army was like a guillotine hanging over Zhuomo's head. Thinking of breaking through Little Mountain Jie was enough to motivate him. The present Zhuomo seemed more like a production shouja. Alright, he had always been a production shouja, Zhuomo smiled in self-disdain. He probably would have never thought that his actions made Pu Yao jump in fright. Pu Yao naturally had his own aims when he had carved the MO matrix and added the Yao seed for Zhuomo. But he never would have expected Zhuomo to progress so quickly. In the sea of consciousness, Pu Yao's expression was heavy as he kept a close look. Does this guy know just how terrifying the things he was studying right now were? Gongsun Cha's luck was not too good. He had encountered a troop of about 60 people. A troop of 60 people could be considered to be quite organized. It wasn't easy to support such a troop. This time, the groups that were still active all were not ordinary. Little Mountain Jie didn't have any low-hanging fruit left. The two sides did not exchange pleasantries. Gongsun Cha did not feel he needed to say anything. This was a habit he had formed during war chess. Pu Yao didn't like to chit-chat with his enemies before starting to fight. Having encountered an opponent that used everything, it could be imagined what habits Gongsun Cha had. On the other side, the people felt that they had twice as many people, and the chance of victory was high. Also, a group of 40 people definitely had some supplies, and probably wouldn't be that poor. So the two sides did not speak and the battle instantly heated up. Gongsun Cha was slightly nervous at the beginning, but when he saw the other side rush forward in messy groups, he smiled. A very warm and sweet smile. The combat units closest to the front retreated slightly. The other side clearly had many of the habits from individual fights. Many of the shouja attacked at the same time, sword energies flying high. Since there were many of their fellows in the surroundings, they were even more brave, and naturally did not keep anything back when they attacked. Several dozen sword energies gathered like a roaring dragon. Of the 3 combat units that were ordered to retreat, one of the units were half a beat slower, and instantly were shredded to pieces. Seeing that 3 people had died, the group became even more brave, charging forward towards the people who were retreating. Having lost 3 people, Gongsun Cha didn't even bat an eyelid. Just as the forward combat units were retreating, the 2 combat units on the second row moved forward. 6 sword energies suddenly erupted between the 2 combat units that were retreating. Pew pew pew. The 4 sword shio that had been charging at the front, and were struck at full force. Blood sprayed out. The sudden change made the shouja at the front panic for a beat, their charge slightly pausing. At the same time, the 2 combat units that had been retreating suddenly reversed direction, 6 sword energies leaving their hands. Another 3 unlucky souls were hit. Before they could respond, the 3 combat units that had been silently moving forward 50 zhang did not hesitate to start a third wave of attack. 9 sword energies sent out with full force turned into a net. The other side had charged too fast, their group densely packed together. The results were astounding. 5 shouja were killed. The head of the other side changed expression. With one attack, the losses were 3 to 12, this made him slightly panic. The 3 waves of attack on the other side clearly had been planned. It was like a tide, one wave after the other, not giving them any chance to think. Expert. He smelled danger, but what calmed him down was that the speed on both sides had slowed down. The following battle would be prolonged combat. His side had the advantage of numbers and a higher possibility of victory. Charge and scatter them. Then hold on to them. Kill. He shouted, his voice ringing out. He had confidence in his Ningmai second stratum cultivation. Coldly snorting, he took his flying sword, and entered the chaotic fray. The distance between the two sides narrowed. No one had the space to charge. Gongsun Cha did not move. There was a combat unit protecting him. 4 people were standing outside the battle, yet no one seemed to notice him. Having seen the good results from the 3-section wave-killing charge, his expression did not move, but the hands hidden in his sleeves were tightly fisted. He had copied this from the mysterious person in war chess. However, the mysterious person was much more effective when he used it. Gongsun Cha had suffered greatly under this maneuver, always collapsing when he encountered it. Even though it was a weaker version, it was enough to cause the enemy to suffer losses. The scene was extremely chaotic, but he was already used to even worse scenes in war chess. His mind had never been as clear as now. He quickly found the head among the enemies. His mind slightly moving, Ma Fan, who seemed to be aimlessly swimming around, started to silently cover the other like a large bird. Chapter 217, Killing Moves. And Ma Fan Mag Fan did not fly quickly and was very steady. Seeing the chaotic battlefield slowly grow larger in his vision, his mind slightly wandered. Truthfully, he admired Gongsun Cha very much. This person that looked even younger than him was a beginner among beginners. It could be seen from the terrible and disorganized training at the start. Ma Fan had assumed that his little life had been in danger now that he had landed in the hands of a greenhorn, and hadn't expected Gongsun Cha to quickly fulfill his role. The messy training had quickly become neat and organized. These days, everyone had shifted from their rebelliousness and terror-induced submission, and gradually showed true respect and compliance. Everyone had climbed over mountains of corpses. They might never had heard of these methods before, but they could tell if it was useful or not. In a group like this, as long as you could continuously lead everyone to victory, and everyone's lives had some guarantees, no one would rebel. Ma Fan was the first person to realize that the tactics Gongsun Cha had set up were useful. Before everyone else had understood this, he had started to rigorously train until he could meet Gongsun Cha's demands. In secret, everyone called Gongsun Cha Lil Miss Gongsun, because he looked feminine and delicate like a woman. This also included a portion of maliciousness and slander. No way around it. They couldn't defeat him, so they could only vent in private. Of course, no one dared to say the name in front of him. Lil Miss might be feminine, but he was a vicious female. Staring at the chaotic battle, the words that Gongsun Cha had keep on filling into his ears appeared in Ma Fan's mind. You have to notice the distance between the enemy's troop, you have to notice the offensive rhythm of the enemy. After each strong attack, there would be an extremely short time where their Ling power cannot catch up. This is when the enemy is the weakest. You have to notice the important targets of the enemy, you need to have battlefield awareness. All of this was extremely strange and unfamiliar to him. Such a troublesome Lil Miss, reflexively muttering, he already reached the border of the battle. Out of the corner of his eyes, he glanced at the leader of the other side. He was extremely eye-attracting, pressuring down a combat unit by himself. Ma Fan did not go immediately to give aid. The 3 people were on the disadvantage, and seemed very bad off, but the 3-person formation had not become messy, and they could support themselves for a while. Just at this time, he noticed there were some people whose Ling power was boiling. It was clearly the early signal for strong sword moves being cast. Usually, the stronger the sword move, the longer it took to prepare. However, the combat unit they were facing evidently were also preparing a big move. No matter which side, the Xiuzha all instinctively chose to distance themselves. The collision between great moves were very strong, and could affect others. A light flashed through Ma Fan's eyes. Rather than retreat, he slowly neared the 2 sides. Taste Yes, Crimson Rainbow Sword. A crimson sword light rose with a howl. Haha, me too, Great Ling Sword Axe. A blue sword energy that was half sword and half axe appeared and heavily sliced down. Bat Ghost crying. 7 or 8 black sword energies shaped like bats made flapping sounds as they drew out a strange curve and headed to the 3 people. The 3 members of the combat unit did not panic, maintaining the 3-talent formation. At the beginning of the battle, they had been panicked, but as they gradually familiarized themselves with the wondrous energy connection unique to the 3-talent formation, their cooperation grew, and their confidence also grew. The great moves of the other side did not make them lose focus. Even usually, one-on-one, they were not afraid, much less now, when they had the aid of the 3-talent formation. The leader of the 3 was Lei Peng. Before he was tamed by Lil Tamis, this guy had been the most vicious and rebellious of them all. Now that someone had ran in front of him and boasted, he instantly got angry. His copperbell-sized eyes stared angrily, his fan-sized large hands opening. Pointing at the 3 people in front of him, he hatefully spat out. "Get them." The other 2 people were also full of murderous intent. Everyone had made their way through rivers of blood. Who didn't have some fire? Who didn't have killing moves? One of them had a serious expression, his hands were covered in balls of blue light. The blue lights became darker, and smaller until they were just covering his hands. But this blue light was very concentrated and seemed like water. The 2 hands punched out, 2 bright blue fist energies leaving his hands, growing as they moved. A concentrated energy covered the landscape. Sky Wave Fist. Zhong Ru was the only Diana of the group. To be able to establish himself in this group, he naturally had his unique qualities. As he attacked, it instantly showed his exceptionalism. At his side, his fellow that was called Nian Lu coldly snorted. He raised his hands up towards the sky, his figure spinning on the spot. His speed increased until his figure became a blur. Above his head, a lotus flower formed with astonishing speed. Flower bud, open, bloom. The faint sword essence was like the sway of the lotus flower, making people uncontrollably attracted to it. Suddenly, a snowy white lotus flower petal tipped in pink fell off. After that, the flower petals fell off, one after the other, until all of them fell off. 1 flower petal was 1 sword energy. 7 or 8 white sword energies with a hint of pink, 80% serenity, 20% enchantment, formed. Nian Lu's ultimate move, Lotus Flower Fall. Lei Peng naturally did not want to be left behind. He was holding a black saber in his hands. With both of his hands, he raised the black saber above his head, and breathed. A heavy strike. A black saber energy shot at the 3 opposite them. A vicious and brutal energy was like a ferocious tiger opening its jaws. Abyss Beast Soul Eating Saber. Killing move against killing move. Blue, red, white, black, multicolored streams of energy flew everywhere. The face-off between 6 Ningmai had caused the region between the 2 sides to become turbulent and distorted with Ling power. No one dared to near. If they were sucked in, even their bodies may not remain. Lei Peng and the 2 wavered slightly. Of the opposing 3, 2 had began bleeding from their mouths and noses. Without a doubt, Lei Peng and the others had slightly won. A saber shio, a sword shio, a Diana shio, this kind of combination was unique among the 40 people. The faces of the enemy 3 were uncertain, and a desire to retreat began rising. This kind of full-force collision did not have any technique. The difference in strength could be easily seen. The Shouja with the crimson rainbow sword moved his eyes. Since their side had more people, why should the 3 of them take the risk? He was just going to call for his fellow to come over when he had a feeling in his heart. He couldn't help but turn his head. A person, carried by countless flickering images, silently appeared beside him. Ambush. His expression changed. Just as he was going to speak, the voice that reached his mouth was shoved back by the afterimages that filled his vision. A flying sword hit his Ling armor without a sound. Destructive Ling power furiously flooded his body. Illusory shadowless sword of destruction. The 4th grade Ling armor on his body was like paper, instantly breaking into pieces. It was as if he was hit directly with a large hammer, his body flying like a sandbag towards the other Shouja. This Shouja changed expression and wanted to catch his fellow. Careful! Before he finished, under the body of his fellow that was flying over, a silent light flashed. When he could respond, a flying sword that gave off no light was 3 zhang away from him. Damn it! He hurriedly put up his flying sword. The swords impacted, ding, a small sound of collision. His body shook, the blood in his face suddenly leaving his face. His eyes were full of disbelief, his eyes slowly becoming empty. The remaining Shouja was also pale, and wanted to retreat. Pew! A white sword energy that had a hint of pink at the tip passed through his chest. His pupils suddenly expanded. He saw the smear of cold smile at the corner of Nian Lu opposite him. Ma Fan's ambush had shocked the entire field. He had successfully bought time for the Lei Peng's group to breath. Nian Lu had made an ambush, and the panicked enemy had fallen. Ma Fan suppressed the roiling of the Ling power inside his body. Having continuously cast, illusory shadowless sword of destruction, twice while flying at high speed, he couldn't help but feel a lack of strength. He didn't go to see if the other had lived or not, hurriedly starting his illusory movement method and disappeared. From the collision of the 2 sides killing moves, to the 3 people losing their lives, the sudden change shocked many people. Ma Fan took the chance to escape. His illusory movement method was most skilled at confusing the enemy. The more chaotic the battle, the more beneficial it was to him. Ma Fan's entry slowly caused the balance of battle to tilt towards their side. The monstrous training regime of the past had started to show its power. The combat units started to help cover and aid each other. Everyone slowly became more used to cooperating with Ma Fan. The more tense the situation, the more advantageous it was for Ma Fan to attack. He was accurate each time. Without knowing it, the advantage grew on their side. Bao De felt that this fight today was terrible. Their side clearly had the advantage in numbers, but as they fought, they grew more tired. He felt as though they had entered quicksand and were unable to use their strength. It wasn't evident in the beginning, but as they fought, the feeling of weakness became even more clear. The other side was 3 people, all clearly Ningmai first stratum, but they managed to stop him. The other side's tactics were very soft, not daring to face him straight on. He felt he wanted to spit blood. Every time he was going to defeat the 3, that person who came out of nowhere would come and disturb him, making his rhythm pause. Because of this pause, the advantage he had managed to build up would disappear and he had to start from the beginning. After fighting for so long, he saw the hints. The 3 were cooperating very well. 1 offensive, 1 distracting, and 1 defensive, and the offensive and defensive would frequently change positions. At the beginning, he had assumed he could quickly get rid of the enemy, but they had managed to stand up until now. He felt quite embarrassed, and his attacks grew stronger, but he hadn't assumed it got more annoying the more he fought. Other than the 3 he was facing, he still had to watch out for the annoying guy that appeared out of nowhere and was as irritating as a fly. He dared to disdain the 3 in front of him, but didn't dare to underestimate Ma Fan. That guy was Ningmai's second stratum. Fuck it, this was no way to fight. Chapter 219, Rewards Conference in Secret. Whenever everyone ever discussed Lil Miss's feminine and delicate face, they couldn't help but be slightly scornful of it. However, when Lil Miss was sitting in front of them, everyone couldn't help but straighten their spines, their eyes straight forward. People like Lei Peng, who had already spent some time under Lil Miss' command, had experience of what to do. In front of Lil Miss, it was best for their eyes to look at their nose to be pointed at their heart. Do not go looking at Lil Miss' eyes. You would always find they were freezing. Reward based on performance. Lil Miss' voice was not loud and was feminine as usual. Lei Peng stilled. Had old Nian been speaking the truth? They were really going to reward based on performance. His heart quickened and he couldn't help but move his body. It wasn't just him. Everyone could not disguise the joy on their faces. There were Jinji in their bodies, so their lives were in Zhuomo's hands. They had originally assumed that they would be cannon fodder, and the thought had never crossed their minds that they would be rewarded. Let's start. Everyone's expression landed in Gongsun Cha's eyes. His heart was very clear, the corners of his mouth rising. He decided to throw out a heavy bomb at the beginning. This is a 5th grade movement method. Boss decided to take it out as a reward. Virum. Everyone's eyes turned to stare at the jade scroll in Lil Miss hands. So hot they almost melted the jade scroll. The temperature in the room instantly rose. 5th grade movement method. That was 5th grade. Any spell, when it reached 5th grade, the value was not comparable. No matter if it was in Sky Moon Jia, or in Little Mountain Jia, only core disciples could cultivate 4th grade spells. This was an unwritten rule. And 5th grade spells? The majority of sects did not possess a 5th grade spell. Now a 5th grade movement method was in front of them, a place they could touch. Breathing was rushed in the room. Without knowing it, excitement climbed onto everyone's faces. If it wasn't for the Jinji, half of the people would definitely go up and steal. Gongsun Cha was very satisfied with everyone's performance. Fair reward and punishment was a governance that every stable troop must have. Gongsun Cha was not worried this crowd of brutes would betray, but it had been a problem for him to increase their motivation. This is an intermediate 4th grade flying sword, called Black Lock, pure in quality. It is slightly oriented towards the water element. It is the best flying sword of this rewards conference. The flying sword was about 1 chi long, the body narrow and black, glistening with a blue light. Once it was taken out, a slightly sword essence rippled like waves across the entire room. Hiss. Inhales sounded below. This group all had good eyes. The quality of the Black Lock sword was not average. Intermediate 4th grade. Most of these shouja were in Ningmai, but only 5 or so of them had 4th grade flying swords, and of those people, all their flying swords were low 4th grade flying swords. This 9 Dawn Ling armor, intermediate 4th grade, it is the best protective talisman of this conference. Wood element, the Ling armor has 4 formations: vitality, evil removing, tranquil mind, and illusion break. In places rich with wood element power, it can automatically absorb wood element power to repair the Ling armor. Gulp. As they swallowed, everyone stared at the Ling armor. This was something good. If they had this Ling armor, it was like getting half of a life. It was like Gongsun Cha did not notice everyone's eyes. One by one, he introduced all the talismans and flying swords. In the room, the heavy sound of breathing was like thunder. Everyone's faces were red and excited. Many people had pulled open their clothing, a layer of sweat on their foreheads. However, they did not detect it, their eyes tightly locked on the talismans and flying swords in front of Gongsun Cha. The light given off by the talismans and flying swords merged and reflected off each person's eyes. Lei Peng's forehead was full of sweat. His throat was dry, his copperbell-like eyes staring wide, afraid he would miss a talisman. When the last talisman was finished being introduced, his heart finally rested. Reflexively, he released a breath. His ears suddenly heard the sound of breathing. He jumped in fright at his loud breathing. It was over. If he angered Lil Thamis, it would be terrible. He grimaced at the first thought that came into his head. But when he saw the breathing of the people around him, he managed to realize that it wasn't just the sound of his own breathing, but everyone breathing out together. The slightly sounds of breathing, under such silent environments, would stand out so clearly. The room quickly became silent, extremely silent, everyone's hearts rose again. Everyone knew what was coming next was the most important. There were only this many prizes, who would get it? How would it be divided? There was a lot involved was this. That would determine what landed on their own hands was good or trash. Those with the most achievements will pick first, one apiece. Lil Miss was extremely clear in this silent environment ere the drop of a pin could be heard. Ma Fan is first. A blush suddenly rose on Ma Fan's face like he had been drinking. In the admiring and jealous eyes of everyone else, he stood up and did not hesitate to pick the 5th grade movement method. Even though everyone had mostly guessed already, but they couldn't help but have disappointed expressions. One of those was Lei Peng. 5th grade movement method. Seeing it slink away in front of his eyes, this feeling wasn't just terrible. But that was just jealousy. No one could say anything to Ma Fan picking first. The effect that Ma Fan had in this battle could not have been done by anyone else. Before everyone had digested the disappointment from the 5th grade movement method being picked away, Lil Miss opened again. Lei Peng, Zhong Ru, Nian Lu, your group is up. You can pick 1 4th grade, 2 3rd grade. Lei Peng's head rang, and then blanked. It was his turn. He didn't know how he stood up. Nian Lu and Zhong Ru's faces were also full of disbelief. It was like a dream. Even Zhong Ru, the most composed of the three, didn't manage to keep his composure. The three people looked at each other. After a while, they found it hard to decide who would get the 4th grade talisman. Seeing the situation, Gongsun Cha decided to decide for them. Straws, set down the order, and take turns in the future. This method was very fair. No one had an objection. The sweat on Lei Peng's forehead grew even more dense, his heartbeat racing because he drew first. The second was Zhong Ru, the third was Nian Lu. He really was shameful, couldn't even calm down. He criticized himself. But he was not slow in picking. He did not hesitate in picking the 9 Dawn Ling armor. Sighs rose in the surroundings. Clearly, there were several that wanted this Ling armor. For some reason, when he heard the sighs, Lei Peng felt every pore of him was in pleasure, and extremely smug. He instantly put on the Ling armor. Zhong Ru picked upper 3rd grade vambraces, and Nian Lu picked an upper 3rd grade boots. Even though they didn't pick something 4th grade, these two were also very good among the 3rd grade. The two people were unable to keep their hands off. Gongsun Cha measured achievement based on combat unit. Each combat unit could pick 1 4th grade item, and 2 3rd grade. The 4th grade items were quickly divided. Those ranked behind didn't even get one, and could only stare. But everyone basically got 1 talisman. As to the Xiuzha like Bao De who had just turned from captive, they could only stare. Gongsun Cha didn't plan on rewarding them. The remaining talismans were put to be used as rewards for the groups that were exceptional in training. Gongsun Cha also clearly stated that once the reward was given, it was the person's personal property. Other people could not take it. Like the 5th grade movement method. Ma Fan picked it, so it could not be given to someone else. If anyone else wanted to learn, they had to ask Ma Fan. As to how to pass it on, or whether to pass it on, that was Ma Fan's business. No matter if it was Zhuo Mo, or Gongsun Cha, they would never have predicted the effect this rewards conference would have. Gongsun Cha still supervised the people in training. The last battle had revealed many insufficiencies. The 3-section wave killing charge, if it was a well-trained troop, if it was his mysterious opponent, they would only need to use it once to destroy the enemy. He hadn't just been unable to destroy the enemy, but had sunk into prolonged fighting. This made Gongsun Cha, who usually demanded highly of himself, very dissatisfied. Lil Miss was dissatisfied, so everyone didn't have good days. However, what Gongsun Cha was puzzled by was just how unexpected these people were in training. Everyone seemed to have been shot up with chicken blood, howling as they furiously trained. And when Gongsun Cha fulfilled his promise by rewarding the talismans to the group that had finished training, he found to his shock that they completely did not need his supervision. There was not a novice among this group of people. They all knew the importance of talismans. Who would dislike having one more talisman? On the battlefield, one more talisman was one more guarantee on their own life. There was no danger of dying in training. This kind of good matter, if it was in the past, everyone would disdain to attend, but in the cruel little mountain Jia of the present, no one had heard of it. No one fell behind. Not having gotten any Ling grains, and having some more mouths to feed, the pressure of Zhuimo to supply Ling grains instantly increased, especially in the recent days where this group had suddenly started to furiously train for some reason. The consumption of Ling grains multiplied. Zhuimo felt the pressure multiply. He put 120% of his effort into studying the Mo matrix day and night. Once he had an idea, he would immediately try it out, not caring for the consumption of materials. Seeing the amount of Ling grains decrease, he felt even more pressured. His progress was not bad. He had eliminated half of the useless constructs. Less than 1/3 of the constructs were remaining. But this 1/3 included more than 70 formation-like constructs. Zhuimo did not have the time to do theoretical analyses. The time was tight. He decided to use the stupidest and most effective method. Try one by one. He started to crazily try one formation after another. In the span of a few days, his room was full of failed products like a little mountain. Not having closed his eyes for 7 days and nights, he didn't even meditate. When his Ling power was used up, he would grasp a Jingshi to absorb Ling power. He looked quite fragile. After 7 days and nights, even if his spiritual power had reached the stage of manifestation, he had reached a limit. However, Zhuimo forgot all the labor, all the exhaustion. He dazedly looked at a peerlessly ugly thing on his hands. Chapter 220, The Fatal Rotten Metal Silver Bauda really had his vision broadened in these past days. The troop in front of him was different than any other that he had been a part of before. 3 people to each squad, that 3-talent formation, that was a pleasure and a pain, enough Ling grains, and there were rewards for the people placed under Jinji. He looked at these old-timers who were now like children fighting to be first. There was no conspiracy, everything was done in broad daylight, it was so simple it could not be any more straightforward, but the troop had transformed by such a direct method. The longer he stayed, the more he felt just how powerful the boss of this group was. It wasn't a power that people could see at a simple glance, but a calm power hidden behind fog and mist. Even though everyone was afraid of Lil Tamis, Bauda had been a leader, and he could tell who was truly in charge. With such finesse, he wouldn't be an ordinary person in the future. To follow such a boss, the future wouldn't be too hard. But boss was a little guy around 20-something that had just entered my first stratum, the luck. No matter how many thoughts swirled in Bauda's mind, his training amount would not lessen compared to the rest. His past identity as the leader and his Ningmai second stratum cultivation did not give him any privileges. What made him feel helpless and depressed was the fact the other 2 people in his little troop were furiously training. It was just a few talismans, was it worth all this? Having been a leader, Bauda naturally wouldn't care about just 3rd-grade talismans. Yet he did not want to get into conflict with his teammates, due to dragging them down, and had to furiously train as well. There was no way around it. Lil Miss rewards were based on combat units, other than being like Ma Fan who was a combat unit on his own. Adding on that Lil Miss was staring from the side, he did not dare to slack. Do not offend Lil Miss in any circumstance. This was the most widespread phrase in the camp. However, wasn't that boss? Bauda saw boss holding a strange object and walk into the camp out of the corner of his eye. He secretly paid attention. However, with his distraction, the 3-talent formation that had been flowing smoothly came to an abrupt halt. With the pause, the rhythm of the entire team was disturbed. The 3 people had to stop. Seeing the dissatisfaction in the 2 people's eyes, Bauda hurriedly apologized. He could offend anyone except his teammates. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know how he died on the battlefield. Gong Sun Cha saw Zuemo hold something strange and couldn't help but ask in curiosity, Shixiao, what is this? Ling processing. Zuemo stopped. He raised the ugly object in his hands in front of his face. What should he call this? It could barely be called a talisman. But there were many kinds of talismans. This thing, which category did it belong to? Treasure box. A strangely shaped box, the box was covered in holes and crack, patched with shapes of various colors and sizes, which made it hard to look at. Ling processing formation. Zuemo pondered and decided to change its shape for next time. Otherwise, it would be hard to even name such an object. A bit ugly, Gong Sun Cha gave a fair review. Seeing the unfriendliness in Shixiang's eyes, he hurriedly tried to move on. What's the use of this? Speaking of the use of this object, Zuemo couldn't help but be smug. Oh, not that much. It can just process the Ling power in the Jingshi, and get rid of impurities. Get rid of the impurities in the Ling power of Jingshi. Gong Sun Cha first stilled, but he quickly responded. His eyes suddenly widened, his voice unconsciously raising, get rid of the impurities in the Ling power of Jingshi. Gong Sun Shidi's reaction made Zuemo even more proud. Exactly. Gong Sun Cha's eyes lit up, his voice tinted with excitement, it can replace Ling grains. Exactly. Zuemo felt his body was unspeakably comfortable. He snickered. I tried already. The effect is pretty good. Taking it here was to find someone to try it out. Without another word, Gong Sun Cha stood up, swept the people training, and saw Lei Peng and the other two who had just finished. He beckoned, Lei Peng, you three come over. Hearing the summons of Lil to Miss, the three hurried over. Gong Sun Cha turned around and asked Zuemo, Shixiao, how do you use this? Oh, put your hand on top of this, and start your scripture. Zuemo put his palms on the two round formations on top of the box. Gong Sun Cha said to Lei Peng, you try. Oh, Lei Peng said with confusion. He didn't understand what this garbage in front of him, but he still complied in putting his hands inside the round formations and started his scripture. Ha! Lei Peng gasped, Ling power. A stream of Ling power was absorbed through his palms and quickly flowed along his channels. Such pure Ling power. He was overjoyed. Such pure Ling power, it meant that he didn't have to spend so much energy on processing Ling power. Endless Ling power burrowed through his palms into his body. In a quick while, he felt the empty channels inside his body feel full. Only now did he suddenly realize the use of this thing. Why was Little Mountain Jie so terrible right now? The most important reason was that the Ling energy in the air had become thin, so thin that it could not be absorbed into the bodies of Xiuzhe. Everyone knew that the Ling power of Xiuzhe was obtained from the world of nature. The Ling energy in the air was the most important source. After these Ling energy were taken into the body, they were processed and turned to even purer Ling power to be stored in the channels of the Xiuzhe. The Ling energy becoming extremely thin in Little Mountain Jie meant that the biggest source of Ling energy for Xiuzhe had been cut off. Xiuzhe were forced to find other ways, like consuming Ling grains. The Ling power contained in the Ling grains were easy to absorb, and were not harmful. The Jingshi that people usually used contained more Ling power than Ling grains, but due to the impurities in the Ling power of Jingshi were more domineering than the impurities of the Ling energy of the air, it was much harder to absorb. If it was used in the long term, it would damage the body. Only some large sects had secret methods to resolve the impurities in the Jingshi. Secret method. When Lei Peng's hands left the box, his mind seemed to be wandering, his expression slightly strange. Nian Lu looked in puzzlement at Lei Peng. It was very rare to see Big Peng have this expression. He couldn't help but look again at that extremely strange and hideous box. This garbage had a use. When his hands left the box, his expression was also strange, muttering something continuously in his mouth like he had seen a ghost. After Zhong Ru tried, his expression could not disguise his shock. No matter what waves had been stirred up in the three people, Zhua Mo and Gongsun Cha were very satisfied with the result of the experiment. The remainder was to slightly modify the appearance. It really was too ugly, even Zhua Mo himself found it hard to tolerate. Gongsun Cha's sparkling eyes tightly locked on the extremely ugly box. He was very clear what this object meant for them. As long as they had this, there was one less chain that was on their necks. In the present little mountain Jia, the price of ling grains had been inflated to a ridiculous price. In reverse, due to the lack of goods, the utility of jingshi was much less. It was common to see jingshi that had been thrown away. The rare ling grains had become the most common currency in Little Mountain Jia. But there is a problem. Zhua Mo's words pulled Gongsun Cha back. He jumped. What problem? If we are producing in large quantities, we need lots of rotten metal silver. Zhua Mo's tone was slightly bitter. I still have some, but it is just enough to make a few. Gongsun Cha stilled, and thought it was unfortunate. He hurriedly asked, is this rotten metal silver very rare? It is a very common third-grade material. Zhua Mo spread his hands. I've used a lot so there's not much left. This problem, Gongsun Cha thought and then raised his hands, indicating for everyone to gather. Everyone stopped their training, looked at each other, before gathering. Their expressions were all puzzled. Lil Miss had never interrupted their training before. Who knows where there is rotten metal silver? Gongsun Cha asked. Many Xiuzhou were confused. What was rotten metal silver? Suddenly, a person raised their hands. I know. That person was Baoda. Where? Gongsun Cha stared at Baoda. When he met Lil Miss' sharp eyes, a cold sweat ran down Baoda's body. However, he had been a leader before, and suppressed the shock inside, pretending to be calm. This one doesn't know about the finished product, but this one knows a rotten metal silver mine. Mine. Zhua Mo's eyes brightened. Where? Baoda swallowed and obediently responded, a place about 300 li from here, called Stone Mountain Beach. Before, it was the location for a sect of Spell Sword sect, now it's possessed by a group. Zhua Mo turned to look at Gongsun Cha. Gongsun Cha instantly understood what he meant. He wanted the mine. Gongsun Cha was slightly puzzled. Even if they had the mine, there was no one to do the mining. However, since Shixiang said he wanted it, then it meant he had a way. He turned to stare at Baoda. How many people are there? What are their origins? Baoda hurriedly said. About 60 or so people. The head, Xia Shan, is vicious and cruel. Ningmai third stratum. His subordinates are all above Ningmai. They heard that Spell Sword sect had ling grains, so they massacred Spell Sword sect and took over Stone Mountain Beach. He then carefully said, if boss wants it, you can buy it at very low cost from Xia Shan's hands. This one has some relationship with him, no need. Gongsun Cha waved his hands, and then said, continue training, to hurry the people away to cultivate. Baoda's words were choked up in his throat. However, he perceptively went to train. What do you plan on doing? Zhua Mo asked in curiosity. He knew that Shidi definitely had an idea. We can beat them until they are crippled, Gongsun Cha said unconcernedly. There is no reason to give them any jingshi. They want to take food from our mouths, humph. Zhua Mo shook his head helplessly. Gongsun Shidi's battle mania was acting up again. Xia Shan's group was really pitiful. He couldn't help but feel sympathy, but when the words reached his own mouth the only thing that came out was, hurry. Chapter 221, What is Puyao doing? Zhua Mo quickly made the new product. Compared to the broken box, the new product was like a piece of art. It was a meditation mat woven from black morning glory, pure black and smooth to the touch. Hair-like strands of rotten metal silver forming the formations were in exquisite and complex patterns. If the mat was flipped over, there were 5 openings that Jingji could be put in. Zuemo had originally planning on making them even smaller to make it much easier to carry, but in the end, he still decided to make them into meditation mats. His technique of weaving mediation mats was very good. The meditation mats were named Black Processing Meditation Mats. On the foundation of the Ling processing formations, he had added Mind Concentration and Calm Heart formations. The effect of the Black Processing Meditation Mats drastically increased. In one go, Zuemo had used all the rotten metal silver to make 5 Black Processing Meditation Mats. With the 5 Black Processing Meditation Mats, both Zuemo and Gongsun Cha steadied their heart. The 5 Black Processing Meditation Mats were not a lot, but if they were used in turns, it could barely suffice. After giving the 5 Black Processing Meditation Mats to Gongsun Cha, Zuemo didn't care anymore. His gains this time was not just the Ling processing formation. The MO matrix on Zuemo's body was a low-level MO matrix called the Copper Rhinoceros MO matrix. The biggest effect of this matrix was that it could automatically temper his body. But even as one of the simplest MO matrix, after being analyzed, it was found to be composed of hundreds of little micro-formations. Zuemo had never seen the majority of these micro-formations and didn't know their effects. But after this time, after finishing his analysis, and trying to forge, he had a direct understanding of these unfamiliar formations. Of the many formations of the Copper Rhinoceros MO matrix, there were 3 formations that Zuemo felt were most useful: Ling Gathering Formation, Ling Processing Formation, and Body Tempering Formation. There had been a detailed introduction about the Ling Gathering Formation in the Kuan-Luan Preliminary Formations Jade Scroll. But the Ling Gathering Formation that Zuemo had found this time was different than any kind of Ling Gathering Formation he had ever seen. It was even more outstanding at gathering Ling. The entire formation naturally formed, and was so exquisite that Zuemo had sighed countless times at the wonders of nature. "This isn't bad," Pu Yao appeared out of nowhere, and stared at the Ling Gather formation that Zuemo was carving now. Zuemo had long gotten used to Pu Yao's ghostly appearances. His hand didn't even tremble. "Of course I know it is a good thing." Zuemo did not disguise the pride he felt. He glanced at Pu Yao out of the corner of his eyes. "With GE's skills, how can the things that GE makes not be good things?" "Oh, not bad, not bad." Finishing, Pu Yao faintly nodded before disappearing. Zuemo, who had wanted to show off, felt his punch had missed and his chest felt suffocated. However, he was also puzzled. Pu Yao, the guy who did not rise early unless there was something to do, he had just ran over to say that this was not bad. There was a problem. Definitely was a problem. Yet, Zuemo couldn't think of where the problem was. He did not think on it and instead started to work with the Ling Gathering Formation in front of him. The Ling Gathering Formation he had obtained from the Copper Rhinoceros MO matrix was exquisite and tiny. The difficulty of carving it was slightly high, but the use was also very broad. He could carve this Ling Gathering Formation on talismans and flying swords. Talismans and flying swords could continuously gather Ling energy from the air. Over time their intelligence would grow. Any material, if they were put in places with thick Ling energy, after being soaked in Ling energy, the qualities of the material would gradually be changed for the better. Zuemo had an even more daring idea, to carve the Ling Gathering Formation on the body like the MO matrix. This way the body could constantly take in Ling energy from the surroundings. Even though the amount of Ling energy taken in each day would be small, but after accumulating for months and years, this amount would be terrifying. This point, Zuemo, who had a MO matrix, had a direct experience. If it wasn't that his channels were not able to store Ling power before, he would have broken through to Ningmai long ago. Even now, his cultivation speed was far faster than normal Shouja. The body tempering formation was using Ling power to continuously temper the blood, flesh, bones, and tendons of the body. Other than Diana Xiu, other shoujo would rarely cultivate their body, but in Zuomo's experience, a strong body was not a bad thing. Even more, no time had to be spent on this. It could automatically temper the body. Would anyone refuse? Most importantly, the three formations that he had analyzed and separated out did not look anything like a MO matrix. No one would connect it to a MO matrix. In these days where Yaomao were roaming about, this point was especially important. After making the black processing meditation mats, Zuomo instantly felt the pressure decrease. He hadn't found how to use the three micro formations right now. He already had the MO matrix on his body. He didn't need the three formations. He decided to cultivate his spiritual power. According to Puyao, the road he was on was star spiritual cultivation. To Zuomo, star spiritual cultivation was slightly novel. Puyao's suggestion was to first strengthen the 10 stars, and he had given the related methods. Zuomo only had to absorb star power, then feed it back to the stars in his sea of consciousness to enlarge his source. It was coincidentally night now. He walked out of the room, and raised his head to look at the sky dotted with stars. He split his legs apart, forward and back, his body like a coiled snake raising its head, his mouth slightly open, his hands pushing on the air by the side, making an extremely strange and awkward pose. His mind empty, the consciousness leaf hand spread its 5 fingers and faced the far stars like a sunflower. His breathing slowly disappeared. A thread of star light fell off the star above Zuomo's head. It was like a silver mist, thread after thread swallowed in Zuomo's mouth. Zuomo felt his mind have a mysterious connection with the star above his head. A vast and ancient presence, from a deep and unknown place, crossing countless eras, and came to him. For some reason, his heart felt moved. A faint silver mist burrowed into Zuomo's mouth, and effortlessly entered his channels. The Ling power in his channels were as quiet as a virgin, not having any enmity against the star power that had been absorbed into his body. These threads of star power made one circuit round the channels inside his body, and then entered the space between Zuomo's brows like a sparrow returning to its nest. In the void above the sea of consciousness, thread after thread of silver mist entered a dim star. Puyao looked at the star above his head and then took away his gaze. He opened his hand. On his palm, there was a puddle of black water. In the center of the black water, there was a miniature altar floating. Nether pool. Finally formed. Puyao said to himself, hopefully this will work. Finishing, he threw the puddle of black water towards the ground. The hand-sized nether pool expanded in a blink to a black pond about 1.5 mu large. On the altar floating in the center, an enchanting black flame jumped. Puyao flew onto the altar. The black fire surrounded him and burned silently. The black water in the nether pool roiled as if there were countless serpents restlessly swimming under the surface. Puyao closed his bloody pupil, his expression solemn. He suddenly shouted, "Rise!" The altar under Puyao's feet suddenly had an astounding power to attract all the black water in the pool flooding towards the altar. The black water quickly flooded the altar, reaching up to Puyao's feet. Puyao did not move, allowing the black water to creep up over his feet. In a blink, the black water was above Puyao's head. An enormous ball of black water stood on the altar. The scene seemed extremely unbalanced. Compared to the black water ball, the altar was pitifully small, making one worried that the enormous black water ball would crush the altar into pieces. Yet this crude altar was as steady as rock. The black water covering Puyao flowed restlessly and sped up. An hour later, the speed the black water ball was spinning at was at an astounding level. The hissing of high spinning speed was not sharp, but still frightening. Having finished his cultivation, Zuomo noticed the abnormality in his sea of consciousness. When he saw the scene in front of him, he was very shocked. What was Puyao doing? The spinning of the black water ball was still increasing. Zhuemo sensitively noticed that as the spinning increased, the black water ball started to show signs of instability. What does this guy want to do? Zhuemo muttered, not daring to move his eyes away. The spinning speed of the black water ball was still increasing. The signs of instability were increasing. The spherical black water ball was majorly distorted. It seemed the situation wasn't good. Zhuemo was slightly worried. Just as the black water ball seemed to be on the verge of collapse, light suddenly shone on the altar, and a heavy presence that was filled with vitality covered the sea of consciousness. Wait a moment. Zhuemo's eyes widened. He was too familiar with this presence. Earth energy. This was earth energy. Having been slightly worried, Zhuemo instantly felt discontent. So this guy had stored the earth energy he had drawn out in the altar. Thinking about the pain he had endured when the earth energy had been drawn out, he gritted his teeth. Other than anger, he became even more curious. What was Pu Yao doing? Clearly, the Yao method that Pu Yao was conducting was something he had aimed for a long time ago. No matter if it was the nether pool, or the earth energy that the other had drawn out, Pu Yao had prepared for a long time. There were many methods in the world, especially the methods of Yao. Zhuemo was too lazy to guess. He definitely would not guess it. He decided to sit and wait for Pu Yao to finish. With the help of the earth energy, the high-speed spinning black water ball quickly stabilized. The stable black water ball started to increase speed again. The altar continuously provided earth energy. Zhuemo's eyes became even more unfriendly. How much earth energy had the guy drawn out of him? Suddenly, Zhuemo raised his head and made a sound of surprise. The ever-accelerating black water ball suddenly started to change. With speed visible to the naked eye, it quickly became clear. In the span of a few blinks, the black water ball became a peerlessly clear water ball. He could clearly see Pu Yao inside the water ball. Through the high-speed water, Zhuemo saw Pu Yao and instantly jumped in fright. Pu Yao's entire body was as black as ink, the skin exposed to the outside looked as though it had been dyed black. The two red crystals on his earlobes became even more alluring in contrast to the deep black. Zhuemo almost did not recognize Pu Yao. He started to become nervous, pain made its way onto Pu Yao's face. Pu Yao had never shown this kind of expression before. What was this guy doing? Did something happen? Zhuemo thought uncertainly. Earth energy continuously burrowed from the altar into the water ball and then into Pu Yao's body. The earth energy seemed to be able to lessen Pu Yao's pain. Pu Yao's expression slowly steadied. The black on his body started to fade. The speed of the water ball slowly slowed. When the black completely faded, the water ball also stopped. Through the round ball of water, a handsome and enchanting male stood. He opened the narrow right eye that was not covered by his hair. Chapter 222, Lil Pagoda's leveling up. Pu Yao stepped out of and off the altar, the water ball collapsing behind him. His expression was not too good. What did you do? Zhuemo probed. None of your business. Pu Yao's expression was dark, his tone unfriendly. Seeing the sign, Zhuemo knew that he couldn't get anything out of Pu Yao and went on his own business. Gu was busy. He started to make puppets for the stone door beach that would soon enter his hands. He had deep confidence in Gongsun Shidi, who was a battle-crazy maniac. He didn't know exactly where the confidence came from. When he thought about it, Gongsun Shidi was just a beginner, but Zhuemo's confidence in his did not lessen because of this. Was this the psychological shadow from having lost in war chess several times? Zhuemo muttered in his heart. There were many ways to make puppets. The most commonly seen and crude method was to use paper and bamboo to make puppets. High-level used things like corpses. After death, corpses would be buried in the ground. Yin and corrosive energies would permeate for long times, and birth some qualities. But in the eyes of large sects, they still avoided using corpses. However, that was not difficult or hard to find. They only needed a suitable corpse, forge it for a bit, and the power would be significant. Most of the corpses used would rarely be human since no one wanted their own corpses to be ruined after death. They were mostly animal corpses. However, Mo didn't have the territory needed to find so many animal corpses. The corpse method was not suited to him. He decided to make the simplest paper puppet, with bamboo as the skeleton, the paper as the body. Paper puppets could not be greatly relied upon, but they should manage in mining. Mo decided to make one to try first. He took out a second-grade rain consort bamboo and second-grade yellow paper. After a while, he finally folded out a paper person. This was the first time he had done this, so his skill was crude, and the paper figure looked very awkward. Mo did not care. He took up the cinnabar brush, and patiently painted characters on the paper person. After a while, the body of the paper person was covered in squiggly characters. Mo put down his pen in satisfaction. Bending down and pushing it in front of his face, he opened his mouth and blew a breath full of Ling energy onto the paper person. The cinnabar seals suddenly lit up. The paper person creaked as it moved, and swayed as it struggled to stand up. The paper person was about 1 chi high. As it walked, the creak of the paper and bamboo was endless. Mo's mind moved. The paper person awkwardly raised both of its hands, making him worry that it would scatter into pieces at any moment. Whoosh! A belt of palm-sized yellow paper suddenly flew out of the arm of the paper person. Different than the awkwardness of the paper person, the yellow paper that flew out was very nimble, accurately grasping a fist-sized rock. The paper belt shrunk back with the rock and flew in front of the paper person. Interesting. Mo looked at the paper puppet and found it more interesting. He controlled the paper puppet to do all kinds of movements. After a while, the paper person plopped to the floor, and would not get up no matter how Mo urged it. Mo hurriedly inspected the paper person and found the Ling energy of the paper person had been used up. This couldn't work. If they stopped after just this little bit, the paper puppets didn't have any value at all. He needed a way to increase the Ling power of the paper puppets. Mo stared at the paper puppet in front of him, thinking inside. What he used were all low-level materials. They could not store much Ling power. This was a problem with all low-level puppets. Mo suddenly thought of the Jingshi talismans. His eyes lit up. Jingshi talismans used Jingshi as the source of Ling power and could be used in the long term. After thinking it through, he felt that this characteristic of Jingshi talismans fit his needs. He wasn't going to depend on these paper puppets to fight or kill. They were only doing some hard labor. A steady source of Ling power would completely fulfill their needs. After thinking it through, he instantly made modifications. Inside the body of the paper puppet, he used thin bamboo to weave a cage that Jingshi could be held and then added new characters along the bamboo skeleton. The newly modified paper puppet was full of energy. After playing around for several hours, it showed no signs of exhaustion. However, Mo quickly found a new problem. The paper puppet did not know exhaustion, but after so many hours, Mo was tired from commanding it. The new problem was very important. These paper puppets were going to be used in mining. He couldn't always stay in the mine and direct them. That wouldn't be as efficient as him mining by himself. To get the paper puppets to mine by themselves and not need his control. If he could do this, even if the efficiency was low, he would be able to offload the heavy duty of mining. In any case, he could fold some more paper people. But quickly, Mo realized that this problem was beyond his abilities. To make the puppet able to perceive, that meant that the puppet needed to have intelligence. There were many ways to create intelligence, but no matter which one, it wasn't something a Ningmai could do. Did this idea have to be discarded? Mo furrowed his brows and though There were more and more for him to do. It would be best if he could split himself in two. Split in two. Like a bolt of lightning, he suddenly thought, Lil Pagoda, something to replace him and connect it to his mind. That was Lil Pagoda. Lil Pagoda was even able to control a formation as complex and large as the Sky Ring Moon Chime formation. A dozen or so puppets would be a piece of cake. Right. Lil Pagoda would be perfect as the supervisor. Swayamo instantly felt confidence. Where was Lil Pagoda? Scanning the surroundings, he didn't find the shadow of Lil Pagoda. His mind moved, wanting to communicate with Lil Pagoda, but found that the connection between him and Lil Pagoda seemed to be blocked by an invisible force. Swayamo jumped in fright and started to search. He quickly found Lil Pagoda in the corner of the room. Lil Pagoda was silently floating in the air, surrounded by an invisible pressure. Silly Bird proudly walked its bird walk around Lil Pagoda in circles, occasionally revealing its concern. Lil Black had climbed onto the ceiling, the two antennae on its head continuously waving. Seeing Silly Bird and Lil Black guarding Lil Pagoda, Swamo's heart felt very warmed. However, the warmth was quickly smashed to pieces by the roll of eyes that Silly Bird had thrown over. Silly Bird took back its gaze, raised up her bird head, and continued to calmly strut its walk. Compared to the rebelliousness of Silly Bird, Lil Black was much warmer and obedient, climbing down from the ceiling, climbing up Swamo's pants until it reached Swamo's palm. The two antennae on its head waving and fawning. So good. Swamo purposefully took out a lingdan and put it in front of Lil Black. Lil Black started to happily chomp. Silly Bird responded with a roll of the eyes filled with scorn and disdain, completely unmoved. Swamo was very irritated. At this time, a five-colored light suddenly appeared on Lil Pagoda's body. Lil Pagoda was leveling up. The displeasure in Swamo's heart instantly was thrown away, his eyes unblinking. Silly Bird also stopped walking and stared at Lil Pagoda, the concern in her eyes completely undisguised. Lil Pagoda was Swamo's soul-tethered talisman. In the recent past, Swamo had fed it large amounts of talismans and flying swords. Swamo was not surprised it was leveling up. Swamo knew pitifully little about soul-tethered talismans, and the grades of normal talismans were useless for Lil Pagoda. In any case, he only needed to know that Lil Pagoda was becoming stronger. Swamo comforted himself. Lil Pagoda had 5 levels, and the light released by each level was different. The 5 colored lights merged and cycled. Inside the 5 colored lights, Lil Pagoda spun, the lights becoming even brighter. In a while, Lil Pagoda was covered in the blinding 5-colored light, and was unable to be seen. The 5 balls of colored light dimmed and brightened like it was breathing. Reflecting off Swamo's face, it was possible to see the nervousness in his eyes. This leveling up, what change would happen to Lil Pagoda? After several cycles, the 5-colored ball steadied. Swamo closed his eyes. He could barely make out that Lil Pagoda was changing. The steady ball of light slowly dimmed until all the light was gone. Lil Pagoda's body had become even rounder, the tip of the power almost a ball now. The eaves were even wider and smooth, giving people the feeling of chubbiness. The little gourds under the eaves were bigger, and rounder. Swamo gaped. These days, did pagodas also get fat? Lil Pagoda shook its body, the chubby 5 levels of eaves opening and closing like 5 little hands that were also waving. It didn't seem to have woken up, somewhat dizzy. However, it quickly found Silly Bird guarding it at the side. The eaves of the 5 levels opened, and Lil Pagoda shook the 5-colored chubby gourds on its body as it skipped over to Silly Bird. Then it spat out a gray bead. Silly Bird skillfully picked up the gray bead and swallowed it. A tragic and pain-filled voice suddenly shook the skies. "You people. I say, this is why has it been so long since this stuff had come out, you guys secretly ate it. Mo furiously pointed and swore. He felt his heart was being carved with a knife. Heavens! The gray bead that Lilith Pagoda had spat out a material that was not in the 5 elements. With silly bird swallow, Mo felt the sky and earth turn. He seemed to see a flood made out of countless jincture enter silly bird's mouth like a whale swallowing water. Pain. Pain of the flesh. Lilith Black, who had been chewing happily, froze, the antennae that had been waving freezing in the air. It slowly retreated, step by step, as slow as a turtle. When it found that Mo did not seem to notice it, it shot away from Mo's body like a black light and disappeared. Mo instantly understood, and gritted out, "Lilith Black, so you were involved too." Lilith Pagoda timidly hid behind Silly Bird, the chubby body shivering. Only Silly Bird was not scared, glancing at Mo, her eyes filled with disdain and scorn. She picked up Lilith Pagoda and proudly stalked her birdwalk away. On the feathers above her but was Lilith Black that bounced with the strides. Mo was so angry he almost spat blood. Gong Sun Cha took back his dissatisfied gaze. The new additions to the troops, training until they could barely fight, it was not easy. In war chess, the setup for this was training took at least 1 year. Other than that, it would take more than 2 real battles. That could only be considered just having formed, and was far from a mature troop. As to a troop of 100 battle elite, that was hundreds of li away. However, the troop in front of him, while far from the troop in Gong Sun Cha's heart, but it had started to take the shape of a troop. Like in the areas of organization, like the still immature cooperation. There wasn't much technique in training, but it wasn't as though there were no tricks, such as real combat. Real battles were always able to quickly increase the strength of the group. Gong Sun Cha stared into the distance, his eyes dark, a cold and cruel smile floating at the corner of his mouth. In this 100-battle hell of Little Mountain Jia, did he have to worry there was no chance for actual combat? Chapter 223, Another Transaction. From today onwards, I do not need earth energy. Pu Yao's words were like a pardon. Mo felt a heavy weight had come off. The damned drawing out of earth energy finally ended. Thinking that he didn't have to endure the pain of the earth energy being drawn out, he felt very good. He suddenly thought about the scene in the Sea of Consciousness. Was it connected? He remembered that Pu Yao's face had been very terrible then. Then he noticed a rare hint of hesitation in Pu Yao's voice. Mo did not speak, waiting for Pu Yao's next words. Unexpectedly, Pu Yao did not immediately speak, but remained silent for a long time. Just as Mo almost couldn't bear it, Pu Yao finally spoke, "Let's do a business." "What business?" Mo's guard rose up, the shock in his heart growing stronger. Pu Yao's voice was full of sternness. The more Pu Yao acted out of the ordinary, the more careful he was. He needed to be careful every time he talked business with Pu Yao. "Help me analyze MO matrices." Pu Yao's tone was light. "MO matrices?" "Yes," Pu Yao looked at Mo, "I have a use for them." "What MO matrices?" Mo asked in puzzlement. Pu Yao thought and then said, "Higher level MO matrices, I'll provide you with specimens." This was too general. Mo warily shook his head. "You understand MO matrices better than I do, I can't help you." Even the MO matrix on his body had been carved by Pu Yao. In terms of understanding of MO matrices, Mo thought that he couldn't compare to Pu Yao. Mo found it strange that Pu Yao had turned and asked him to analyze MO matrices. Pu Yao was not angry. Glancing at Mo, he said, "You are not wrong, but this only shows that I've lived longer than you. Even though I do not want to admit it, but you are the most talented person I've seen with formations. Right now, you cannot overcome me, but you have the potential, this is heaven-given talent." Seeing Mo keeping his silence, Pu Yao continued, "I am not in a rush. I have enough patience. This can only be good for you. I can supply countless types of MO matrices. What you have to do is very simple, just study them. Copper Rhinoceros MO matrix is one of the lowest MO matrices. The effects of those high-level MO matrices are not things you can imagine. Suo Mo's heart moved. Pu Yao had not lied about this. Of the 3 formations he had gained from the Copper Rhinoceros MO matrix, all of them were very useful, but were not high grade. Take for example the body tempering formation. No matter how strong the Ling energy was, the effect of its tempering would have a limit. If he could receive even higher level MO matrices, he could find even higher grade formations that were more complete. Even more importantly, the process of analysis was a cultivation progress, and he could increase his understanding of formations. Pu Yao had not finished his pitch. He understood Suo Mo's personality. To get this guy to agree to something, it was not hard. He only needed to give something that the other could not refuse. That was what he was doing now. No matter if it is Xiuzhe or Yaoma, I know at least a bit about all kinds of cultivation methods. I can guide you in your cultivation. Your cultivation is not pure. Ling power, spiritual power, body, you cultivate all of it. If you receive accurate guidance, you might be a miracle. However, if you keep going like this, it would only become more heterogeneous, and in the end, you will achieve nothing. Suo Mo knew that Pu Yao's words were not empty threats. Truthfully, he himself had already felt that his strength was too heterogeneous, yet he lacked true understanding of each kind of power. Or maybe I can help you solve the secret in your body. The last bomb that Pu Yao lightly threw down was like a bolt of lightning. Changing features and erasing the mind, not many Yaoma use these. Only the cruelest of people would do such things. He glanced at Suo Mo, changing features and erasing the mind, it basically cannot be undone. Suo Mo's heart sunk. The temperature of the room was not low, but his body felt cold. Your body has something else. Pu Yao's words were shocking. What? The words jumped out of Suo Mo's mouth. A very rare 5-element glass bead. Pu Yao said, sealed inside it is another person's power, or maybe something else. There may also be a clue. Pu Yao continued, if there is no trace inside, then use reverse shadow spirit silkgrass. It is very hard for memories to be completely erased. There would always be some fragments left. If you use reverse shadow spirit silkgrass, you can find these pieces. I know of a place you can find reverse shadow spirit silkgrass. Suo Mo was silent. Pu Yao looked at Suo Mo and knew he needed time to digest this, closed his mouth and patiently waited. A long time later, Suo Mo felt his mind start to move. Staring at Pu Yao, his voice was raspy as he asked Pu Yao, how do you break the Jinji on the 5-element glass bead? You to reach Jindan, or for me to recover my power? How long would it take me to reach Jindan? Pu Yao had a careful expression. I cannot guarantee this. Okay, unexpected to Pu Yao, Suo Mo agreed. Originally, he had wanted to ask Pu Yao why the other wanted him to analyze MO matrices, but thinking about it, that didn't have anything to do with him. It seems that we will be in business in the long term. Pu Yao's bloody pupil was a patch of peace, his gaze holding none of the underestimation and arrogance he held previously. The 3 formations Suo Mo had discovered from the Copper Rhinoceros MO matrix had been an enormous blow to him. What had blown Pu Yao away wasn't how exquisite the 3 formations were but Suo Mo's efficiency. The time that Pu Yao had spent on pondering MO matrices was longer than Suo Mo's lifetime, but he found that his pace was that of a turtle climbing compared to Suo Mo. The astounding talent that Suo Mo displayed in formations shocked him, and allowed him to see a thread of hope. The effect of the nether pool was not as good as he had imagined. His situation was not good at the moment. Even more, he didn't have many choices. A series of factors forced him into a position of cooperation. Suo Mo didn't know these reasons. He didn't need to know. Just the secret in your body that Pu Yao had said was enough for him to agree to this transaction. This matter had always been an illness plaguing his heart. Zhuemo was very practical, and he did not have high ambitions. He liked a peaceful life. Even if he knew that his consciousness had been erased, in the depths of his heart, he unconsciously did not hope for himself to enter a life of revenge. Adding on that he had no clues, this matter had been deeply buried inside his heart. His hard work and labors were not for revenge, but to survive. This was his reality. Yet no one could disregard their past, especially when he was told that there was a 5-element glass bead inside his body. His heart was instantly struck. Who put it there? What connection did the person have to him? He wanted to know. Pu Yao was very satisfied with the transaction this time. He was very clear to Zhuomo's situation. To an expert who was able to massacre Gongsun Cha in the war games, and having experienced the 1,000-year battle, Pu Yao's line of thinking was more far-sighted than Zhuemo. What did Zhuemo need most right now? Strength. The troop that Gongsun Cha had made could only be considered distant water, and distant water could not resolve nearby thirst. The growth of strength had its necessary patterns. Pu Yao knew this, but he naturally had his own reasons to dare to say such words. What he was relying on was not anything other than Zhuemo himself. Zhuomo's cultivation, due to different reasons, had been constantly suppressed by Pu Yao, and it was this suppression that caused him to be on the precipice of a boundary. His own situation made Pu Yao realize he had to change his strategy. You are at the doorway of a breakthrough, Pu Yao said straightforwardly. Your body cultivation is in mountain physique. Even though it is only one mountain, it is one step away from an abhina. One mountain. Abhina? Zhuemo became alert. The mountain physique is divided into 3 strata, one mountain is the first stratum. You have cultivated to mountain physique, absorbed earth energy, your body cultivation has truly made it into the gate. Now that you have reached mountain physique, you are not far from an abhina. Pu Yao said a little lie right there. Originally, Zhuemo should have been able to achieve an abhina a long time ago. However, he had deliberately stopped it, and so, even now, he still hadn't formed an abhina. Pu Yao's face didn't blush as he said, abhina is the term used by Diana Xiu. When cultivation of the body reaches a certain level, the self becomes enlightened, and the abhina forms from the self. The abhina is born of the self, and so everyone's abhina is naturally different. Zhuemo didn't really understand. Oh, Diana likes talking so mystically. You can understand it like this. What is body cultivation? It is to forge the body as though it is a talisman. When it reaches a certain stage, some abilities would naturally form. Each person's blood and flesh is different, so the abilities are varied. After Pu Yao's explanation, Zhuemo felt he understood much more. Talismans, and flying swords, after they were tempered for a long time, they would naturally become more powerful. I can form an abhina. Zhuemo was slightly excited. He was very curious what his own abhina was. Oh, pretty much, Pu Yao muddled, absorb more earth energy these next days. That stuff is very useful. In order not to have his lie seen through, he quickly changed the topic. Other than an abhina, there is something else that can dramatically increase your strength. As expected, Zhuemo was guided by his words. He was slightly shocked. What is it? He never knew that he had anything on his body that could greatly increase his strength. That 5-element glass bead, Pu Yao said. 5-element glass beads are somewhat rare talismans, it can store Ling power, and turn Ling power into 5-element base source. Turn Ling power to 5-element base source. Zhuemo was slightly shocked. He was reminded of Lil Pagoda. Lil Pagoda was able to deconstruct talismans and materials into 5-element energy, but compared to 5-element base source, 5-element energy was the lesser variant. 5-element energy could form marrow, forming 5-element marrow. The little gourds hanging on Lil Pagoda's eaves were 5-element marrow. 5-element base source was the finest and best part of 5-element marrow. Yes, 5-element base source is something very good. When you were injured last time, it was this bead that repaired your body. 5-element base source is very easy to absorb, and suitable for body cultivation. I wonder who put it in, they were really extravagant, Pu Yao said with a smile. Strangely, Zhou Mo suddenly felt his heart move. This movement was very suddenly. He suddenly had a feeling this 5-element glass bead was very important to him. He could not say why he would have this feeling, but this feeling was strong, so strong to the point that he could not disregard it. He did not know who this 5-element glass bead belonged to, but the person who put this 5-element glass bead in him, it must be one of his closest people. Was it his parents? He raised his head, his tone decisive. Don't use it. Let's cultivate an abhina. Chapter 224, Pu Yao's teaching. Pu Yao said it easily, but an abhina was not so easily formed. After being modified by earth energy, Zhou Mo's body could contain more earth energy. Zhou Mo spent all of his time absorbing earth energy. When the earth energy entered his body, it would turn into hundreds of thin streams that spread throughout every part of Zhou Mo's body. Zhou Mo felt his strength was very full, and the mountain peak diagram on his palms were becoming increasingly clear. According to Pu Yao, his body cultivation could be considered to have finally crossed the threshold. As he absorbed earth energy, Zhou Mo savored the difference between body and sword cultivation. Compared to those complex and profound sword scriptures, body cultivation was much easier. He only needed to continuously guide the earth energy to every part of his body and continuously temper it. Body cultivation was a test of his patience more than anything else. Zhou Mo guided the earth energy into the blood and bones, which previously had had earth energy drawn out from before by Pu Yao. After multiple rounds of tempering, Zhou Mo was very familiar with his body, and it did not require any effort. There was some earth energy that could not be absorbed and swam between his blood and flesh. He was not rushed. Tempering was a labor of time, and it could not be hurried. The blood, bone, flesh, and tendons of his body seemed to breathe. When the amount of earth energy they absorbed reached a certain level, they would become full. Zhou Mo's knees slightly bent, his two palms were covered in a dark blue light. He continuously used his two palms to hit his body. With each blow his body would lightly shudder as though he was struck by electricity, becoming numb and itchy. Each blow would cause much of the earth energy to shatter into smaller dust-sized particles. Pia pia pia, Zhou Mo continued for 2 hours before he stopped. The earth energies that he had taken in today were all absorbed in. He stood up. His body, rather than being tired, was in unspeakable ecstasy. He knew that as long as he persisted, his body would become even harder and stronger, becoming as difficult to damage as a talisman. He suddenly seemed to like body cultivation. The offensive strength of body cultivation and dhyana shio could not compare to sword shio, but tempering the body bit by bit continuously built his confidence. Every pore in his body felt stronger every day, and continuously made him even hardier. Many dhyana shio would not use a talisman in their entire lifetime because they would use all their time on tempering their own bodies. Their bodies were not the least bit lacking compared to strong talismans. The bodies of dhyana shio after their death were the best for corpse forging, but no one dared to do so. Xiuzhe who had dared to do so had all been killed without exception by dhyana shio. Mo is the best at body cultivation. The Vajra Profound Sutra, that you cultivate might be low level, but it isn't bad to use when building your foundation, Pu Yao said coldly. Whenever he mentioned something related to the gravestone, he never had a good tone. From the core, humans are not suited to body cultivation. Because we do not have Mo matrices. Zhou Mo reacted quickly. Exactly. With the Mo matrix, the efficiency of body cultivation is multiplied. As for body cultivation, Ling power is not the best choice. Ling power is most skilled in transformations. The Diana bunch were all people who didn't have any sword scriptures at the time, and had no choice but to mimic the MO in body cultivation, and only achieved half the effectiveness. Pu Yao was full of scorn in his words about the Diana show. He continued icily, MO understand body cultivation, but there is a world of difference there. Those slightly better body cultivation MO arts all have strict inheritance rules. Humph, the inheritance of Yaoma is much stricter than Shouja. How do Yaoma inherit? Sui Mo was full of interest and asked in curiosity. The best inheritances in the MOGS are mostly in the hands of MO above the level of general. They are warlords, ruling over large numbers of lower-level MO in their territories. In any of the MOGA, inheritances represent strength. In order to learn an inheritance, one has to continuously give their loyalty to their master. In the future, if you encounter MO army, you have to be careful. Why? Are they even stronger than the Yao army? Sui Mo was slightly shocked. In his experience, the Yao army he had seen that day was so strong that he didn't even any thoughts of resisting. The Yao army obeys commands as one, but in terms of obedience, no army can compare to the MO armies. The military laws of the MO armies are so strict that no one is above them. Any MO general will have hundreds of subordinates that are willing to die for him. Brave, not afraid of death, and fanatical obedience. As long as the MO general is not too dumb, any troop would have a headache when faced against them. They aren't afraid of death. Sui Mo didn't understand. He found it hard to comprehend this kind of loyalty. It was not that he did not believe in this kind of loyalty, but he felt that this kind of loyalty would only appear on a few select people. If a whole troop was not afraid of death, then it was too scary. Because of MO skill inheritances. Any kind of high-level MO skill inheritances will have its own unique intelligence awakening technique that can bestow thought. What you people might say is that MO are born from intelligence beasts. In reality, to be able to be called MO, there is one condition, that their intelligence has been awakened. Behind every MO is their clan. But to become MO, their intelligence must be awakened. Only beasts that have their intelligence awakened can cultivate MO skills. If they die, their clan would benefit, and will receive more opportunities to awaken the intelligences of more MO. These are the rules that any MO general in any MOGA would abide by. Why don't people awaken some more? Sui Mo asked. Awakening a MO intelligence comes at a price. Pu Yao looked at Sui Mo, and said, there are those that are naturally born intelligent, but the number is very low. Those MO are very talented in cultivation. But then, doesn't it mean that they forever have to be subordinates? They aren't stupid. Pu Yao smiled icily and said, joining the army, there is a chance to receive low-level MO skill inheritances. The military achievements they accumulate can be used to trade for better inheritances. Even though it cannot be the top MO skills, but the inheritances they receive can be given to their clan members. If they can comprehend the technique to awaken the intelligence on their own, their clan will start to walk on the road to prosperity. As though whether the clan can become a family, it depends on their fortune. How do Yao have inheritances? Sui Mo was even more curious. The clans of Yao are even more complex than that of Shouja and Mo. Over there, it is very easy to learn low-level knowledge. Pu Yao had a reminiscent expression. Our reproduction is not as difficult as the Mo newborn Yao would be educated in their clans. When they reach a certain age, they will all be arranged to enter a Yao art house, and learn higher-level Yao arts there. The best that graduate from the Yao art houses would have chances to follow more powerful Yao and learn even higher-level Yao arts. Sui Mo gaped as he listened. He had always assumed that the world of Yaoma was full of chaos and killing. But listening to Pu Yao, it seemed that they were even more peaceful than the Shouja Jie. Seemingly having guessed Sui Mo's thoughts, Pu Yao smiled coldly. Don't think of it as so beautiful. Machinations in the shadows are never lacking anywhere you go. When he got to there, Pu Yao seemed to have thought of some displeasing matter, his face slightly ugly. Suemo twisted his mouth. Pu Yao was too ungenerous. It had been thousands of years, but this guy was still holding a grudge. In the future, he could not offend the other. The guy really held grudges. Pu Yao's introduction completely changed Suemo's impression of Yamo. Your strength is not powerful, and you've learned many things. Even though it is a bit chaotic, but it's not as though there are no benefits. Pu Yao continued, the Vajra Profound Sutra, it gave you is rough, but it's truly a Mo skill. As for Ling power, no matter if it is spells or manipulation, or control, you are not less than any other Shouja. There's nothing that needs to be said about spiritual power. Star's spiritual cultivation, great and little thousand-leaf hands, they are all the best of Yao arts. Also, you are skilled in formations. This is especially important, Pu Yao discussed like one learned in many areas of knowledge, no matter if it is Shou spells, Yao arts, or Mo skills, at the core their essence is the laws of the world. If you do not understand formations and practice all three kinds, you will end up with a terrible mixture. Three kinds of power, they have changed and transformed over the long months and years, and now walk on different paths. However, formations are something that can connect all three together. When he got to there, Pu Yao became careful. I do not know what you will become in the future because there has never been a precedent. The formations of Shouja were the first to develop and the most complete, but Shouja do not know much of Yaomua, so I've never heard of anyone having a breakthrough in this area. Why? Suemo found it very strange that Shouja would disregard this. They had fought against Yaomua for so many years, but why would Shouja still know so little about Yaomua? Pu Yao wanted to roll his eyes and mock Suemo for his ignorance about history, but upon further thought, he managed to resist it, and patiently explained, Jingshi and talismans are more effective. As long as there are enough materials, the strength of a Shouja would quickly grow. No matter if it is a Mo skill or a Yao art, even though it can be aided by external forces, but they're very limited and far slower than using Jingshi and talismans. Also, Mo skills and Yao arts are not suited for Ling power. The more they are practiced, the more heterogeneous it becomes. Why are swords Shou strong? Because they only cultivate Ling power, only cultivate the sword. They only need more Jingshi, better materials, stronger talismans and flying swords. In reality, the path of Shouja is to steal, increasingly professional theft. Suemo didn't know how to reply. Upon further thought, while he felt that Pu Yao's words were slightly ugly, but they held some truth. However, Pu Yao's tone turned and became full of scorn as he said, by taking advantage of outside sources in the long term, they comprehend less. Even though I do not know what the situation is like at present, but if I have not guessed incorrectly, the true experts of the Shouja are probably fewer in number than thousands of years ago. Ha ha. Tilting his head, Suemo didn't know. Sky Moon Jia was a small place, he didn't know anything about the outside world. He unconcernedly shrugged his shoulders. Never mind them, let's first take care of ourselves. Pu Yao snickered and didn't speak. After Pu Yao's guidance, Suemo felt his own thoughts were clear and distinct. He had a general understanding of his future cultivation. Ling power, body, and consciousness, they represented the three separate areas of Shou spells, Mo skills, and Yao arts. The three were connected together by a single bridge, formations. His confidence had increased from when he had analyzed and identified the three formations from the Copper Rhinoceros Mo matrix. At this time, he suddenly found some points that he had disregarded before. For example, the growth of his consciousness was enormously beneficial for control of Ling power. Didn't his own fine control of Ling power come from his spiritual power, which was far above those of the same cultivation as him? He suddenly had a feeling that his own Ling power would most likely change after his body cultivation improved. He couldn't help but be full of anticipation. Chapter 225, Breakthrough in Body Cultivation. Before Zuemo had formed his Abina, Gong Sun Cha had already taken Stone Door Beach. The high efficiency made Zuemo gape in awe. The losses this time were smaller than the previous, and the Xiuzha captured were more numerous than last time as well. Included in this group was the head of the group, Xie Shan. When he saw the 3-section wave-killing charge that Gong Sun Cha had formed, he understood that the strength of the two sides were not on the same level. Even though there was not a large difference in terms of numbers, his rationality urged him to choose surrender. After he had surrendered and learned that the other had attacked them just for the rotten metal silver mine of Stone Door Beach, he was so depressed he almost spat blood. If he knew beforehand, he wouldn't have hesitated in giving it to them. In the present little mountain Jia, who wanted a mine? If there were no puppets or show slaves, the cost to mining could not be imagined. Xie Shan could not understand, no matter how hard he thought, why this group of people would want the mine. However, while he could not understand the other side's intentions, he could clearly see the difference in power. The Xiuzha that had survived until now all had keen eyes, and a person that could lead a group couldn't just rely on his Ningmai third stratum cultivation. Xie Shan naturally had his own unique characteristics. He could see that the group was well trained, not a group of wandering and loose soldiers, and definitely had a deep background. However, when he was told that Jinji was going to be put into him, he was dumbstruck. When he saw Zuemo, he was dumbstruck again. A guy of Ningmai first stratum. Zuemo was well versed in how to set down Jinji. It only took a little while for Jinji to be put into the bodies of this group of people. Naturally, Jinji were not infallible. If someone's cultivation reached Jindan, the Jinji would become ineffective. In this group, the one with the highest hope of becoming Jindan was Xie Shan. However, it was just a possibility. The difficulty of breaking into Jindan was much higher than entering Ningmai. After entering Ningmai, Ling power would start a constant increase. Reaching the level of third stratum was mostly dependent on an accumulation of Ling power, but to break through from Ningmai to Jindan, it also required comprehension. Zuemo did not worry in the slightest. Of course, the most important reason was that worrying was useless. The new camp was set at Stone Door Beach. Chun Yucheng's beast pool was also moved over. When the 3 golden armor guards appeared in Xie Shan's vision, Xie Shan finally accepted his fate. The cultivation of the golden armor guards did not seem as high as his, but the aura of danger that surrounded their entire body made his heart shudder. When he saw the date seed ship, the last bit of resistance in his mind dissipated. Not anyone could possess a Jingshi talisman. In this period of time, other than body cultivation, Zuemo had done something else. He had carved the 3 formations from the Copper Rhinoceros Mo matrix onto the 3 golden armor guards. With these 3 formations, the golden armor guards would continuously absorb Ling power, and then temper their bodies. Even though Pu Yao had not explicitly stated the origins of the golden armor guards, but Zuemo had guessed it. After he had asked Pu Yao, he was informed that the reason these 3 golden armor guards were so strong was due to having used such quality materials such as ancient dragon bone and nether water. It was not possible to buy ancient dragon bone when one wanted to, and all of the nether water had been used up in the previous matter. It was temporarily impossible to make new golden armor guards. Zuemo tried to think of ways to increase the strength of the golden armor guards. Even more, where else could he find such good experiment subjects like the golden armor guards? Zuemo didn't need to worry at all about making a mistake when he carved the formations. In Zuemo's view, the reason that the golden armor guards could not increase in strength was that they could not keep cultivating like Xiuzha could. There were no real differences between golden armor guards and the puppets, they both manipulated the power they already possessed. The 3 formations that he carved onto the golden armor guards could continuously temper their bodies. With the continuous influx of Ling power, theoretically, there was a possibility that the 3 golden armor guards could improve. This was only a theoretical speculation. After moving to Stone Door Beach, the most important matter was to make black processing meditation mats. Zhuemo made 100 paper puppets and threw them into the mining pit. The mine already showed signs of excavation. Rotten metal silver was not a valuable material, and was easy to sell. To any sect, this mine was a steady source of income. Lilth Pagoda was set in command of using the paper puppets to mine. The difficulty of mining the ore was extremely low at this location, which was why paper puppets could be used. If it was a much more complex and dangerous mine, it would require higher-level puppets. Quickly, rotten metal silver ore was continuously delivered to Zhuemo's hands. Zhuemo used the golden crow fire to process the ore. Rotten metal silver was extremely malleable and had a metallic sheen. It would naturally form with unique holes that made it look like rotten pieces of metal. With the rotten metal silver, Zhuemo immediately made large quantities of the black processing meditation mats. When the people under him personally experienced the benefits of the black processing meditation mats, everyone held their mats with a death grip, afraid someone would steal it. Everyone understood what this black processing meditation mat meant. As long as they had a black processing meditation mat, they did not have to fight anymore with other people for ling grains, and did not have to worry that their cultivation would collapse one day due to lack of ling grains and die. The enthusiasm of the troop towards training suddenly increased. With the black processing meditation mat, they could cultivate like they did before to increase their cultivation. For any cultivator, there was nothing that could move them more than this fact. In such a harsh environment, without any pressure from Gongsun Cha, everyone trained with their life. The black processing meditation mat allowed them to see the hope of leveling up. They were also completely won over by Gongsun Cha's battle tactics after 2 battles. No one wanted to die. Able to see hope, anyone was willing to put in their all. Earth energy continuously moved from the ground into Zhuemo's body. The infection of the ling veins did not cause the earth energy to also thin, but instead had made the earth energy even more dense, and full of vitality. This kind of transformation was unexpected to Zhuemo. However, he understood after thinking it over. Now that ling energy was decreasing, Little Mountain Jie was developing in the direction of Bloody Sky Metropolis Jie. This kind of environment was much more suited to Yamo. The increase in earth energy most likely was only one of reasons. Denser earth energy was more suited to Mo to cultivate their bodies. Zhuemo's body had been continuously tempered and washed by the earth energy. In the last few days, he had gone over every part of his body, not even missing his hair and nails. Nurtured by earth energy, he did not look as thin and weak as he had previously. His figure became much broader, as he could feel the enormous strength contained in his body as he moved. This was purely the strength of his body of flesh. He had tried with the flying sword. If he did not use ling power, the flying sword was unable to slice open his skin. Not just so, his bones and flesh were also tempered. Without using ling power, he could easily punch granite to pieces. He didn't even exclude the skin on his face. Pu Yao had suggested that he did not temper his face, because it would increase the difficulty of regaining his original features. However, Zhuemo still persisted in tempering his face. In the present situation, the first priority was surviving before anything else. Zhuemo could feel that every muscle and bone in his body had reached the limit that he could reach at the moment. He instantly understood that he was on the cusp of a breakthrough. He calmed down his mind, slowly absorbing earth energy. His body was extremely well adjusted to earth energy. Earth energy could easily pass through every part of his body. He felt the pleasure from his bones and flesh soaking in the earth energy flowing past his blood and flesh, making the blood and flesh tremble, and produce a tingly and itchy feeling. The tingly and itchy feeling increased like there was countless ants climbing in his body. Zhuemo forced himself to not move. He tried to relax his body to absorb earth energy. His consciousness slowly sank into his body. His consciousness was much purer than previously. The size of the leaf hand had not changed, but the leaf hand was much denser than before. At the center of the palm of the leaf hand, some patterns had appeared that looked like the lines of a human palm. Every tiny change of his body, under his consciousness, became clear like they never had been before. The earth energy became increasingly dense, the amount of earth energy in Zhuo Mo's body reaching an astonishing level. Even the channels which were full of Ling power felt the pressure from the earth energy. However, the Ling power in the channels would not so easily retreat. Seeing the earth energy and Ling power about to conflict inside his body, Zhuo Mo's heart rose. He hadn't expected the earth energy to leave the channels of their own initiative. The attention of the earth energy went back to his blood, bones, and flesh. The plentiful earth energy started to slowly charge at Zhuo Mo's blood, flesh, tendons and bones. Zhuo Mo uncontrollably started to tremble. If the charge before had been like the itch of ants, then it was like there was a saw slowly sawing his body. He didn't dare to move. He knew that this was the earth energy helping him reconstruct his body. If he could endure this moment of enormous pain, the benefits he would receive would be incomparable. Under the charge of earth energy, each muscle in his body slowly moved. The slightly slack muscles became even tighter and firm, and the connections of the muscles, under the stimulation of the earth energy, started to furiously grow. It was like the root of a tree that continuously grew and burrowed deep into the ground. Growth, what it changed wasn't just his muscles, even his bones were continuously compressed. The bones became even thinner, but they were multiple times stronger. Zhuo Mo shook like dice, the enormous pain causing his eyes to redden, but he did not make a sound. The earth energy moved and occupied his eyes. His vision became a blur, unable to see anything distinctly. These days, after Pu Yao's teachings, he had a much deeper understanding about body cultivation. He knew the longer that he resisted, the more benefits he would get. The pain rolled like waves. His body was soaked in sweat, a puddle at his feet. He didn't know how long it had been, his mind was blank. There seemed to be a voice far away talking to him. But his mind was unmoving. He didn't heart one word. That voice, it seemed to sound somewhat like the voice that appeared in his dreams. After an unknown period of time, his wandering and uncomprehending mind slowly recovered. The scene in front of him slowly became clear. The bone-aching pain had disappeared like the pain just now had never existed. His body felt as though it was soaking in hot water, the pleasure coming from the deepest part of his body making Zhuo Mo want to groan. But the sweat all over his body told him that the hell-like pain had not been a delusion. Zhuo Mo suppressed the urge to sink back into the pleasure, instinctively raising his palm. When he saw his palm, he was dumbstruck. Chapter 226, The Stage of Two Mountains. The previous withered palm seemed somewhat like metal now, with a barely perceptible layer of faint gold. Several golden lines were especially visible on his palm. Another mountain peak had appeared beside the mountain peak at the center of his palm. Two mountains. Pu Yao suddenly came out, slightly shocked as he looked at the two connected mountain peaks on Zhuo Mo's palm. Zhuo Mo was also very shocked. He had thought that he would form an abhina this time, and had not expected that he would break through to two mountains. This is the stage of two mountains? Zhuo Mo asked with slight curiosity. He continuously opened and closed his hand, feeling the great strength passing from his palm. Pu Yao looked at Zhuo Mo like he was looking at a weirdo. He could not understand how Zhuo Mo had reached two mountains so quickly. He had never thought that this was his achievement. It was due to him continuously drawing earth energy from Zhuo Mo's body, causing Zhuo Mo's body to have been tempered multiple times that Zhuo Mo had been prepped ready. Zhuo Mo seemed to know the cause, but thinking that Pu Yao and the gravestone seemed to be at odds, he decided to muddle over it, changing the topic. What is the benefit of the two-mountain stage? His body, which had become robust-looking, had become thin once again. However, each muscle in his body had become stronger and firmer, hard as metal. His strength had multiplied. He gently stomped his feet. Poof, his right foot seemed to have stepped into tofu, sinking to his calf. He pulled out his foot, and saw the edges of the hole were very clean, like it was carved out using a mold. The mountain represents strength. The stage of 2 mountains represent that you can use 2 mountains of strength at maximum. Pu Yao thought for a while and hadn't managed to find an explanation, so he threw the problem to one side. He was gradually adjusting to Zhua Mo, occasionally surprising him. How strong is 1 mountain of power? Is it to be able to move a mountain? Is that possible? Zhua Mo said unconcernedly. Pu Yao's face was one of disdain. How is that strange? If a Mo skill is at a significant level, moving mountains or flipping oceans is not anything. That Dong Fu town of yours, wasn't it a town built by a sword xiu lopping off a mountain peak with 1 blow? That's true, but I feel that I don't have such great strength, Zhua Mo argued as he looked at his palm. How long have you cultivated? You want to move mountains and flip oceans? Pu Yao's face was full of scorn. When Shouja cultivate Ling power, don't they need to also coordinate with sword scriptures and spells? Mo are the same. Other than body cultivation, Mo skills also teach you how to use the strength of the body. He paused and then said, the thinking of Mo is very strange. They feel that their body is the most primal source of all their strength, but also feel the body is a cage. You may have reached the stage of 2 mountains, but in reality, even if you familiarize yourself with Mo skills, you cannot use all of your power. Even if your technique is there, your body would first be destroyed. So it's like that. Zhua Mo instantly realized. Pu Yao's words were very reasonable. Suddenly thinking of his goal for this time, he hurriedly asked, then have I formed my abhina? Check, is there a place that is abnormal? Pu Yao helplessly reminded. It really was hard work to teach a newbie. Abnormal? Zhua Mo hurriedly calmed his mind and took an inner look at his body. He quickly found the abnormality that Pu Yao was speaking of. This abnormality was at his eyes, and not any other place of his body. His eyes looked into the surroundings. The thick earth energy seemed to have been attracted by an invisible strength, and tightly wrapped around his eyes. This was. He didn't dare to move rashly, using his consciousness to carefully examine the 2 balls of earth energy. What reassured him slightly was that his eyes did not feel any discomfort, but no matter how he worked, he could not affect the 2 balls of earth energy. After trying many times, he helplessly came out of his inner perspective. Did you find it? Pu Yao asked with curiosity. It's the eyes, Zhua Mo was slightly dejected. I tried, but didn't know how to use them, and don't know what they are used for. Eyes, Pu Yao said, your luck isn't bad. There are many abhina regarding the eyes, and those are somewhat useful. An abhina cannot be taught, the abhina that each person forms is different. You have to slowly experiment, and make your own conclusions. As to not able to use them, don't worry. Many abhina cannot be used when they first form. They need to slowly form, and stabilize before they can be used. Your abhina may belong to this kind. Zhua Mo wasn't depressed. He was very satisfied already with reaching 2 mountains. Pu Yao said in a deep voice, don't worry about the abhina. It is not easy to find Mo skills, but don't you have a Dhyana Xiu under your command? You are able to use the fist scripture that he has. In terms of Yao arts, embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, and the great and little 1,000-leaf hands, are enough for you. The worst you have right now is scriptures for Ling power. Embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, in the end is still for cultivating the spirit. We need to find you a scripture. Zhua Mo was shocked at his favor. When was Pu Yao ever so concerned with him? Pu Yao sunk into thought as though Zhua Mo did not exist. Seeing the situation, he perceptively went about his own business. However, he clearly noted down Pu Yao's words. Zhong Ru could not be anything but puzzled when he heard the boss had called him. Truthfully, even if he was the only Diana Xiao in the group, he did not have many outstanding qualities. His strength could only be considered intermediate. The only aspect he was good in was probably defense. In this group of sword Xiao who didn't seem to know what defense even was, as a Diana Xiao, his defense was like the crane among the chicken flock. His personality was very steady, so even though he was shocked, he was still composed. When he saw Zhuo Mo, he respectfully bowed. "Boss." Zhuo Mo couldn't help but praise him inside. In terms of mentality, Sword Xiao could not catch up to Diana Xiao. The Diana Xiao emphasized mental strength and their samadhi. Things like illusory formations were less effective against them. Zhuo Mo didn't mince words, straightforwardly saying, "I want your sky wave fist scripture, give me a price." Zhong Ru shook his head. Sky wave fist scripture isn't a profound scripture. If boss wants it, please go ahead. Zhuo Mo waved his hand. This belongs to you. If I want it, I will either buy it or trade for it. Relationships and business are not mixed together. Seeing that Zhuo Mo did not seem to be pretending, Zhong Ru was truly shocked this time. He had followed many people before, and was used to seeing those above demand talismans and scriptures from their subordinates. Hearing boss's astounding conclusion, the shock he was experiencing could be imagined. However, Zhong Ru was still wary. All up to boss. Seeing Zhong Ru's caution, Zhuo Mo felt slightly helpless. He wasn't pretending with his words. In the sect could not unreasonably take the possessions of the disciples. If they wanted something, they needed to pay a corresponding price. That was also his attitude. He thought and then said, "You can pick a talisman of the same grade as Sky Wave Fist Scripture, or," he suddenly had an idea, "trade for 3 formations." 3 formations? Zhong Ru was puzzled. "I can carve 3 formations on your body. One is a Ling gathering formation, one is a body tempering formation, one is a Ling processing formation," Zhuo Mo explained. The Ling gathering formation can constantly help you absorb the Ling energy in the surroundings. The Ling processing formation is similar to the black processing meditation mat, and can filter out the impurities in the Ling energy. The body tempering formation can use Ling power to temper your body. You are a Diana Xiao, these 3 formations are very suitable for you. The usually composed Zhong Ru couldn't help but have an expression of disbelief as he unconsciously gasped, This is not possible. This was not possible. Zhong Ru had walked many places, and had a wide range of knowledge. He had never heard of any formations that could be carved onto a person's body. These 3 formations, if they were truly as boss had described, then was there a need to cultivate it all? Zhuo Mo did not argue. "You can pick 2 talismans." Zhong Ru's expression changed, his heart conflicted. His reason told him what boss said was impossible. However, he could easily tell that boss had not lied. If it was truly as boss had said, this was a chance that came 1 in 1,000 times. Suddenly, he laughed. What did he have to be afraid of losing? Zhuo Mo saw Zhong Ru's expression return to normal and knew that Zhong Ru had made his decision. Zhong Ru raised his head, and said with determination, "I choose the 3 formations." In a mountain valley about 300 li from Stone Door Beach. Boss, Xie Shan of Stone Door Beach was taken in by someone else. A Xiuzha reported. What are their origins? A Xiuzha with crimson-red hair furrowed his brow. He was called Venerable Qi. He had more than 150 subordinates, and was one of the major powers in this area. Haven't found out yet, this Xiuzha said with slightly terror. Seeing the anger on Venerable Qi's face increase, he hurriedly explained, "We don't know where this bunch of people came out of. There aren't many, but they aren't weak. When they were taking down Xie Shan, there were only a few dozen people." A few dozen? Venerable Qi's expression changed. Xie Shan should also have about 60-something people, and isn't Xie Shan my 3rd stratum? Ningmai third stratum definitely was first-rate experts in Little Mountain Jie. In battle, the effect of an expert like Xie Shan was enormous. He could take on 7 or 8 people by himself. This Xiuzhe raised his head to look at his leader. Seeing the anger on leader's face decrease, his heart relaxed slightly. The battle finished very quickly, and did not leave traces. Does this group have some powerful talisman? Venerable Qi pondered. He was clear about Xie Shan's strength. He had wanted to conquer Xie Shan a long time ago, but he had not acted due to his fear of Xie Shan's strength. He had more than 150 people under his command, but not one was Ningmai third stratum. Suddenly hearing that Xie Shan had been defeated, he naturally became wary. Did the group also have Ningmai third stratum experts? If it was like that, then it was terrible. Adding on Xie Shan, it meant the other side had at least 2 Ningmai third stratum. The other possibility was the group had a powerful talisman so terrifying that even Xie Shan had to surrender. No matter which possibility it was not good news to him. If it was possible, he wanted to immediately take his group and leave behind this place. With the power he had, there were not many that dared to target him. However, when he thought about the things inside the cave, he gave up on the thought of escaping. That thing was really too important to him. Venerable Qi was not a person that did not have brains. He was very clear that once the group had digested Xie Shan's power, their own strength would quickly increase. The next target would definitely be them. After thinking for a while, he raised his head, and said in a deep voice, "Call the 3 Kong brothers over." Incredibly awkward, but Buddhist meditation or samadhi is a different concept than the mediation that has been seen previously. Of course, stuff becomes weird here because mediation is a Buddhist practice that became inspiration for cultivation novels, so all cultivators are Buddhist from a certain viewpoint. Chapter 227, Internal Orders. Mo did not immediately start practicing Sky Wave Fist scripture that he had gotten from Zhong Ru. Instead he decided to organize his thoughts first. Just as Pu Yao had said, he knew a variety of things, but upon further inspection of these areas, the ones that were powerful were pitifully few. Presently, the most powerful item in his arsenal was the Yin fire bead. It was extremely damaging as a frontal attack. However, since Yin fiend grounds were hard to find at the moment, he could not create Yin beads. So Yin fire beads were a limited resource. Also, if the enemy was on their guard, the effectiveness of the Yin fire bead was not high. There was also the 5 essence sword set. Even though he did not have the scriptures to progress further with it, the little sword formation originated from the sword essence formation and was still astoundingly powerful among the Ningmai Xiuzhe. However, it had not been tested in battle before, and Zhua Mo did not know just how powerful it was. What the 5 essence sword set used was a sword formation. From this perspective, it was more like a formation disc that was forged from 5 flying swords. Over time, he had also managed to get 5 moves of Little Thousand Leaf Hands from Pu Yao. Little Thousand Leaf Hands had many variations and was hard to predict. He could only barely manage to cast the 5 moves, and was still far from being smooth and familiar with them. What Little Thousand Leaf Hands manipulated was the Ling energy of the world. It had many requirements for the environment and was not easy to cast. But once it could be successfully cast, it would be immensely powerful. After practicing Sky Wave Fist scripture, he would have another move. However, Pu Yao had also said that Sky Wave Fist scripture was not some powerful fist scripture, and the power should not be very shocking. Thinking about it that way, Zhua Mo felt that overall his moves were lackluster. In terms of talismans, Lil Pagoda was a soul-tethered talisman, but it was more skilled in controlling formations. While the other talismans that he possessed were valuable, but he did not have talismans that were at the very top of the grade. No matter the grade, the finest talismans of the grade would have their own special characteristics. A strong feeling of danger arose. Zuemo had already decided to use gang fighting against the Jindan expert of Clear Sky sect, but that did not mean that he did not need the power to protect himself. At the very least, he had to guarantee that he could survive the upcoming gang fight. The best place to cultivate was in the camp. Zuemo decided to move to the camp. Having Boss personally come to the camp instantly made everyone alert. They did not dare slack off. Their eyes occasionally floated in the direction of Boss. No matter if it was an old-timer or one of the new members, they all knew one thing: Boss had many good things in his possession. The first person to benefit had been Ma Fan. A fifth-grade movement method, many people had stared at it with red eyes. These days, they personally saw Ma Fan practicing the fifth-grade movement method that he had received. The dazzling images that had been produced before could not even be perceived now. He was like a wraith, suddenly appearing and disappearing. Every shouja who saw this scene had uncontrollably inhaled sharply. When they thought of Ma Fan's untraceable and powerful, illusory shadowless sword of destruction, together with this silent and untraceable movement method, they knew he was able to kill any of them without a trace. Lil Miss had also given Ma Fan a beast service card. No one dared to underestimate the gray and nondescript butterfly. While Ma Fan made everyone jealous, they had nothing to say. Ma Fan's power was obvious. His cultivation was not as high as Xie Shan, but his effect during battles was not something Xie Shan could compare to. Even Xie Shan would admit it. What was more, the numbers of enemy killed were written in bright red cinnabar and his score not something anyone could hope to match. But Zhong Ru's encounter had gotten many people thinking. Zhong Ru was a docile person and could not defend against the probing of these people and had completely admitted to everything. Boss had insisted in trading, and this reassured them all. What dissatisfaction could they have in following such a boss? However, a few days after the inquiry, Zhong Ru's furious improvement shocked his team members. Nian Lu and Lei Peng, Lil Miss also discovered Zhong Ru's present situation, and instantly took him out to cultivate on his own. Eventually everyone had found out that Zhong Ru had 3 formations carved onto his body which had led to such miraculous effects. Instantly, everyone's heart moved. 5th grade movement method was a reward based on service, and there was no chance to change this. But these 3 formations were something that Zhong Ru had used a fist scripture to trade for. In other words, these formations could be traded for. These experienced old-timers, how could they not understand this? Boss had also came to cultivate at the base. With such a good chance, how could they let it slip past their fingertips? The first one to try was Lei Peng. He had been stimulated the most after practicing with Zhong Ru every day. This guy seemed like a rough man, but in reality, his mind was extremely attentive. He even had managed to get the effects of the 3 formations out of Zhong Ru. The use of the body cultivation formation was not large for him, but he drooled at the other 2 formations. This guy was extremely daring, and took advantage of a chance to rest to approach Zuemo. This rough man used an extremely ingratiating tone to say, "Boss, can I ask you for something?" Zuemo looked with slight surprise at Lei Peng. "What is it?" "And also wants 3 formations carved on the body." Hearing Boss make a sound of surprise, his heart jumped and he hurriedly said, "And is willing to use Abyss Ghost Saber scripture to trade." Zuemo instantly understood. Was there any reason to refuse business that came up to the door? Even more, he was still very unfamiliar with carving formations onto the body. It was rare that there was an experimental subject that came up to him. Zuemo's heart rejoiced. Zuemo made a sound and pretended to think. Carving the formations is not so simple. There is a risk. Lei Peng had already mentally prepared for this point. There was no free lunch in the world. How could there not be any risk in such a speedy and simple method? However, he asked cautiously, would it harm the cultivation? No, but it will leave behind scars if it fails. Because it uses a special Ling liquid, even scar-removing Dan may be unable to remove it. Lei Ping instantly released and breath and chuckled. An's a man, so An doesn't need to be so pretty. The failure of the carving would just be a scar. Which guy that lived off a bloody blade to survive would care about that? Seeing the situation, Zuomo said expressionlessly, I don't need a saber scripture. If you want to trade, you have to use something else. He had already learned a variety of things, he didn't plan on adding a saber scripture to the mix. Lei Ping instantly panicked and flung open the 100 treasure pouch on his waist and emptied it. Boss, take what you want, and we'll trade. Zuomo narrowed his eyes and swept across the objects. Suddenly, his gaze slightly froze. He picked out a fist-sized jade rock from a pile of knickknacks and said, this one. Okay. Lei Ping was overjoyed. What he was most worried about at the moment was that he didn't have anything that Boss wanted. He seemed to be afraid that Boss would regret his decision, and he hurriedly packed away everything else. Come with me. Zuomo stood, and after an exchange with Gongsun Cha, he left with Lei Ping. When Lei Ping joyfully returned in the evening, the camp instantly exploded. When Lei Ping bared his upper body and showed off the 3 formations that had just been carved, other people drooled. With an example of success, the crowd started to move. Who didn't have something good on their bodies? Materials, talismans, jade scrolls. Boss traded for everything. Boss was even willing to take some talisman remnants. Also, Boss never demanded an outrageous price. He would only pick one item each time. Many times, everyone felt that Boss was a businessman full of professionalism. Almost all the Shouja decided to carve the formations. Zuomo's waiting line had already formed a 20-day backlog. He felt he would be driven insane by what he was gaining this time. After taking down Xie Shan, he had 110 people under his command. Other than Zhong Ru and Lei Ping, everyone else had queued up for getting formations carved. What was more practical and valuable as increasing one's strength? None of them were beginners. Everyone understood the value of these 3 formations. Even if Zuomo's condition had been more stringent, the great majority would still have chosen to get them carved. However, Zuomo's conduct of picking only one had left an impression of not greedy on the people. If Zuomo's facial expression could move, he would definitely be smiling widely. There was not much in terms of talismans that could move his heart, but there were some precious jade scrolls. He had even found the summer flower ling farming jade scroll. He had been searching for this thing for a very long time. The result was that he had picked it out from a pile that appeared to be garbage. What he had gained the most was all kinds of materials. These people all had cultivations in Ningmai, which of them would collect normal materials? Zuomo had picked all 4th-grade materials. He had the golden crow fire now and could process these materials. Even Pu Yao felt jealous of Zuomo's gains. However, the transaction between them did not include the dividends of the profits Zuomo would get from using the formations. If it had been in the past, Pu Yao would have no consideration in taking from Zuomo. But right now, Pu Yao was in a position of asking a favor from Zuomo, and could not do so. The red-eyed Pu Yao could only use another method to vent the dissatisfaction in his heart. You've already familiarized yourself with the Copper Rhinoceros MO Matrix. This is the MO Matrix 4, Golden Wing Great Rock. You should try to analyze it as fast as possible. Pu Yao threw out a jade scroll. The MO Matrix recorded inside the jade scroll was much more complex than the Copper Rhinoceros MO Matrix. After just one look, Zuomo felt slightly dizzy. Pu Yao was very smug. In any Mo Jia, Golden Wing Great Rocks were nobility, and possessed an unique bloodline. They were born abnormal, not needing any technique for their intelligence to be awakened. They had the highest kind of inheritance. After evolving each generation, their bodies gradually became perfected, and the MO matrix on their bodies was also perfected. Their only weakness was one common to many clans with superb bloodlines: low reproductive ability. Such a complex MO matrix was far beyond Zhuo Mo's abilities. Pu Yao had purposefully given the Golden Wing Great Rock Matrix to Zhuo Mo to douse Zhuo Mo's arrogance. A MO matrix as perfect as this one held a fatal attraction to Zhuo Mo. Zhuo Mo would uncontrollably be attracted to it, and be tortured by it. When the fire was right, he would then throw a low-level MO matrix to Zhuo Mo. The more Pu Yao thought, the happier he became. For some reason, when he saw Zhuo Mo's recent smugness, he was very displeased inside. Just as Pu Yao had imagined, Zhuo Mo was completely enchanted by this MO matrix, deeply enchanted. Pu Yao could clearly detect when Zhuo Mo first saw the Golden Wing Great Rock Matrix, his breathing had stopped. However, unexpectedly, Zhuo Mo had displayed astounding self-control. The first thing he did after his trance was throw the jade scroll into the ring. Then Pu Yao heard Zhuo Mo grit out as he carved formations for people, his mouth almost convulsing as he chanted, "Refrain, refrain." There were frequent screams that came out of Zhuo Mo's room. Chapter 228, Ma Fan's Decisiveness. Ma Fan had a separate cultivation area, which Gong Sun Cha had specifically drawn out for him. It was a little corner closest to the water. The geography of Stone Door Beach was very wide, next to the mountains and water. Occasionally, white birds would swim by on the water. The cruel conflicts in Little Mountain Jie had not affected them, thus they still lived idle lives. They did not have anything that Xiuzhe would scheme after. They were not Ling beasts, and the change in Ling power did not affect them. The remnant rays of the dusk reflected off the water, the white birds dragging their long shadows, the reeds gently waving in the wind. Unconsciously, Ma Fan stopped training, and walked to the water, looking into the distance, his heart peaceful and serene. Suddenly, he lifted his eyelids, wariness flashing through his eyes. Without changing expression, he lowered his arm, the jade card that was tied to his wrist touched his fingertip. A finger-sized gray butterfly silently grasped onto the inside of his middle finger, looking like a nondescript gray ring. Ma Fan's eyes were covered in an imperceptible layer of gray. It looked as though his eyes had become dimmer. Ling pupils. His vision silently changed. The dense reeds gradually became transparent, and a ball of shadow was visible as it hid among them. So that's where they were hiding. The other's position was about 150 zhang away from him. He didn't have the confidence to kill with one blow at this distance. From the position the other had chosen, the other could be considered very careful. If he could not kill with one blow, it would be unlikely to be able to stop the other in this open landscape. Ma Fan guessed that it was a spy from some other faction. This distance was more suited to watch but not an ambush. If this was in the past, Ma Fan would have most likely chosen to disregard it. It was better to not invite trouble, he disliked trouble. But today, the first thought that flashed through his mind was actually to kill the other person. When he managed to respond, he couldn't help but feel shock at his first instinct. However, he didn't waste much time on his emotions. He recalled the reminders Gong Sun Cha had said many times to him. The greatest taboo on the battlefield is indecisiveness. You are the core, you must be decisive, you must make the choice in a lightning flash. No matter if the choice is right or wrong. This distance, he wasn't certain of killing with one blow. What should he do? You have to believe in your fellows, don't just go at it alone. What would you do if you don't have a chance? Very simple, you have two choices, you can make chances for your teammates and your teammates can make chances for you. Ma Fan turned around, his expression normal. He saw three fellows. He only recognized one person of the three, the guy that was called Xie Shan. He had been the leader of the group they had captured last time. Supposedly, his cultivation was Ningmai third stratum. In reality, he had hoped that the three people he saw was the Lei Ping team. Even though Xie Shan's power was far stronger than the Lei Ping team, but this team was made of new members and didn't have any familiarity with him. However, he didn't have a better choice. Old Xie, he raised his arm, and shouted. Xie Shan stilled and stopped moving, turning his face towards Ma Fan, puzzled on the inside. He naturally recognized Ma Fan, the core of the entire troop. The one with an incomparable position, the most trusted subordinate of Lil, Mississippi. But Xie Shan had never spoken one word with him. Hey! Even though he was puzzled, he still responded with a smile. In the troop, he was the newest of the new. Even if his individual power was the highest, to gain Gongsun Cha's trust, it required time. He wasn't so stupid as to offend Ma Fan. Come help me train, let's try my new movement method. Ma Fan's tone was intimate as he shouted. Xie Shan imperceptibly furrowed his brows. He might be a newbie, but he was used to being the leader, no one had dared ask him to assist in training. However, the other's intimate tone did not hold any negativity. What puzzled him even more was that he had never seen Ma Fan find someone to train with him in the past. It was slightly strange. Suddenly, his eyes locked onto the palm that Ma Fan had raised up, a finger-sized gray butterfly peacefully grasping his middle finger. His heart suddenly jumped. It had been Gongsun Cha who gave the gray butterfly beast service card to Ma Fan. It was rare to see him use it. If it really was a spar, Ma Fan should not have summoned the gray butterfly. Xie Shan was very experienced. He thought as he smiled and walked towards Ma Fan. Okay. The other two Xiuzha on the team looked at each other and did not speak. They could not afford to offend Xie Shan, much less Ma Fan. The two just stopped to watch. Ma Fan and Xie Shan did not waste words, starting immediately. What Xie Shan cultivated was the Aurora Mirage sword. This was a rare 5th grade sword scripture. He didn't need to show his flying sword, raising his hands, multicolored sword energies flew out like an extremely beautiful aurora above the snow. An icy presence instantly spread. Under the aurora in the sky, snowflakes danced, sharp as knives. Sword essence. Ma Fan's heart instantly shook. This was sword essence. In the camp, all 110 Xiuzha were all Ningmai, but there wasn't more than 5 people that had comprehended sword essence. As expected of the strongest person of the camp. With this attack, Ma Fan felt the pressure increase. The bright sword essences were like mist and dust, carrying a cold presence. Under the beautiful appearance was fatal killing intent. The slowly spreading sword essence was like countless thin strands that were invisible to the naked eye that would silently trap a person. However, you aren't the only one who comprehended sword essence. Ma Fan's gray eyes slightly narrowed. Xie Shan intended to show his strength. In the previous battle, he had not displayed his strength. Gongsun Cha's 3-section wave killing charge had been too ferocious. It was like an enormous hammer. With one blow, Xie Shan's group had been broken into pieces. Seeing the situation, Xie Shan had immediately surrendered. Up until now, he had not had a chance to showcase his own strength. It was a pity that Gongsun Cha was not at the camp. Xie Shan felt some regret. If he could display his full power in front of Lil Tamis, it would be of great aid to increasing his status within the troop. However, there were only benefits and no disadvantages to displaying his strength in front of his fellows. He was quickly surprised by Ma Fan's strength. Theoretically, there was a level of strength between the two. Xie Shan was Ningmai 3rd stratum, and Ma Fan was just Ningmai 2nd stratum. However, from the battle, it did not seem like a battle between two opponents of different power levels. Xie Shan had never seen the confidence and determination that Ma Fan showed in another person. Was this what it was to be the core? Each of Ma Fan's blows would create many fake illusions that dazzled the eyes, but what shocked Xie Shan right after was that the afterimage of each sword energy did not disappear, but howled as they shot towards Xie Shan as though they were tangible. Sword essence. Ma Fan actually also comprehended sword essence. The last thread of underestimation in Xie Shan's heart disappeared. He did not use his full power, but he was also clear the other also had killing moves. Ningmai's second stratum was able to match him. Xia Shan couldn't help but feel slightly bitter inside. The multicolored aurora and the intangible sword shadows flew into the sky. There were continuously sounds of explosions but were controlled to an extremely small area, sounding like corn popping. The Shilja in the camp had all stopped, turning their faces up to watch the fight. Everyone had an excited expression. One was the definite core of the troop, one was the Shilja with the highest cultivation of the camp. The battle between the two was the strongest collision. In the sky, a multicolored ball of light, dozens of zhang appeared. Inside the ball of light, it was tightly packed with multicolored sword energies and illusory sword energies, the figures of Ma Fan and Xia Shan flickering in and out of sight. Gasps rose at the ground. The two had displayed extremely high control to have suppressed the sword energies to such a narrow space. Inside the light ball, the Ling power and sword energy density had reached a terrifying level. Any consciousness that wanted to peer in would be torn to shreds. Everyone's hearts reached their throats. What was the situation like inside? No one would have thought inside the ball where sword essences were blowing and killing intent was spilling, the two people were chatting and smiling. What's the situation? Xia Shan said with a smile. Ma Fan praised Xia Shan inside. The two had never cooperated before. Xia Shan was very strong to be able to detect his intentions. He didn't waste words. There's a person crouching in the reeds. Oh. Xia Shan was very surprised. He had carefully inspected the surroundings when Ma Fan had asked him for a spar, but had not found anything. He did not doubt Ma Fan's skill. Gasping on the inside, his expression became serious. What do you plan on doing? Kill. Ma Fan did not hesitate in saying. Xia Shan was shocked at Ma Fan's viciousness. A normal person would first think of capturing the enemy alive in this kind of situation in hopes of obtaining useful knowledge through interrogation. He hadn't expected that Ma Fan didn't think before he said to kill the other. He did not object, and said briskly, okay. I'll flee and you'll chase in the direction of the reeds. The people on the ground saw a figure suddenly break through the ball of light, the sword essences that made up the light ball collapsing. Sword energy pieces that could not be countless lost control, and shot into the surroundings. The surrounding crowd jumped in right and took up their flying swords to block these sword energy pieces. These sword energy pieces might look broken and scattered, but in reality, they were extremely sharp and deadly. As the ball of light dissipated, Xia Shan's hands were covered in a five-colored light. A multicolored sword about half a zhang wide, and 3 zhang long appeared above Xia Shan's head. Go! Xia Shan's hands suddenly closed together, the enormous aurora sword turning to a thick multicolored light that shot at Ma Fan in the air. As the enormous aurora sword appeared, the expressions of those on the ground changed slightly. The terrifying presence spread by the enormous sword made everyone feel shock. When it turned into a stream of light, the entire sky seemed to change color. Ma Fan was in danger. Just as Ma Fan appeared to have been hit by the flowing light, he suddenly disappeared. Impossible. The sword essence of the enormous sword was very dense. If it had locked on, it was an extremely difficult matter to escape. Any kind of movement method would be slowed, no matter how short the pause would be. But Ma Fan did not show any pause. He disappeared in the air. Having lost the target, the enormous sword light rushed at the reeds. A gray shadow suddenly shot out of the reeds and moved to escape. The enormous sword made an unexpectedly nimble turn in the air and charged at the gray figure. The gray figure stilled slightly. He felt a bone-aching sword essence pressuring him in from all sides. The enormous sword essence had tightly locked onto him. Damn it! Shocked, he channeled all the Ling power in his body towards the flying sword and aimed it at the streaming sword light. With this attack, his own flying sword would undoubtedly be destroyed. He didn't have the time to mourn. He suddenly saw a grey flying sword silently appear at his side. His pupils suddenly expanded, his heart dropping in an instant. He ferociously bit through his tongue, a flush of blood flashing on his face as he spat out a bloody arrow. If he could stop this attack, he could escape. The other did not seem to have any intentions of dodging, the second flying sword welcoming the arrow of blood. A joyous expression came onto his face. This arrow of blood was his secret life-saving method. It was extremely powerful. If the other wanted to meet it head-on, it would definitely stop the enemy for a few moments. Pia. A clean and crisp collision, the joy on his face froze. Everything in his vision became so slow, he could see it with the utmost clarity. The arrow of blood collided with the flying sword, the expected retreat did not occur. The arrow of blood was turned to a handful of bloody mist, a cloud of dust-sized blood droplets that flashed in front of his eyes as beautiful as a painting. A flying sword emerged from the bloody mist and entered his body. It was as though he was hit with a 30,000 catty hammer. A bloody mist floated out of his body, the surroundings moved backwards with astonishing speed. A last thought flashed through his mind, such a heavy sword, that you're tuning into the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.